in the fog-shrouded valleys of Eldoria, nestled between jagged peaks that clawed at the sky, stood the ancient strongholds of two rival houses, the silver-bannered House Volkov and the obsidian-crested House Corvus. For centuries, their animosity had painted the land in blood, a ceaseless war fueled by pride and a hunger for dominance. Their fields were salted with sorrow, and their halls echoed with the wails of the bereaved. But then came the long silence, a peace so profound it was unsettling. The war horns fell quiet, the swords were sheathed, and for the first time in generations, the people of Eldoria knew a life without the constant shadow of conflict. This peace was not won on the battlefield, but forged in the darkest heart of the Gloomwood, a forest that breathed shadows and fed on secrets. It was there, before a gnarled ancient hardwood tree, that the lords of Volkov and Corvus made a terrible pact with a being known only as the Whispering One. To end their war, they agreed to a gruesome tribute. Every 20 years, on the night of the Twin Moons eclipse, each house would offer one of their own children to the entity. A boy from one house, a girl from the other, alternating with each cycle. A blood price for peace, a generational sacrifice to keep the beast of war chained, and so it was. For 200 years, the pact held. The names of the chosen children became sacred, whispered in hushed tones as martyrs for the greater good. The spires of Volkov and the rookery of Corvus, once symbols of defiance, became gilded cages, their lords and ladies bound by a promise sealed in fear. Peace flourished, but it was a fragile bloom, watered by the tears of grieving parents and rooted in a soil of unspeakable horror. The Whispering One was patient, its hunger sated by the biannual offering. The forest remained still, its shadows contained. Our story begins as the 10th cycle approached. The air grew heavy with anticipation and dread. This time, it was House Volkov's turn to offer a son and House Corvus a daughter. Lord Valeris Volkov, a man whose face was a mask of stoic duty, prepared his youngest son, Kale. Kale was a quiet boy with eyes that held the wisdom of an old soul, resigned to a fate he had known since birth. In the rookery, Lady Serafina Corvus, her heart a storm of rebellion, looked upon her daughter, Ilara. Ilara was fire and spirit, her laughter a melody that defied the grim reality of their world. Serafina had watched her own sister walk into the Gloomwood 20 years prior, a memory that had festered into a burning resolve. She would not allow her daughter to be another ghost, another name on a cold stone monument. The peace, she argued, had become a prison, its cost too great to bear. She believed there had to be another way, a way to break the cycle without unleashing the old wars. On the eve of the sacrifice, under the watchful gaze of the twin moons beginning their slow dance of convergence, Serafina Corvus made her move. She sent a secret envoy to Lord Valeris, not with a plea, but with a proposal. A desperate, audacious plan to defy the Whispering One. She offered a truce, a true alliance, sealed not by blood sacrifice, but by a union between their houses. Her daughter, Ilara, for his son, Kale, not as offerings to a monster, but as husband and wife, a symbol of a new, unbroken peace. Lord Valeris was torn. To break the pact was to invite unimaginable wrath, not just from the entity, but from his own people, who had come to see the sacrifice as a holy necessity. He had lived his entire life by the letter of the law, the pact his sacred text. Yet the thought of his son walking to his death gnawed at his soul. Looking at Kale, who stood ready to fulfill his duty without a word of protest, Valerius saw not a martyr, but a boy who deserved to live. The courage in Seraphin's defiance sparked a long-dormant ember of hope within him. He agreed. That night, as the twin moons merged and cast a blood-red light over the land, the procession to the Gloomwood was a sham. The children presented were not Kale and Ilara, but enchanted effigies, carefully crafted to deceive. Kale and Ilara were hidden away, their clandestine wedding ceremony taking place in a secluded chapel as the eclipse reached its peak. For a moment, it seemed the plan had worked. A fragile hope began to blossom, but the Whispering One was not a creature to be so easily fooled. As the final vows were spoken in the chapel, a tremor shook the very foundations of the earth. From the heart of the Gloomwood, a sound unlike any other erupted, not a whisper, but a shriek of pure, unadulterated fury that shattered the night's silence. The heartwood tree, the site of the pact, bled a thick black sap, and the shadows of the forest began to writhe and stretch, no longer contained. They slithered out from the trees like grasping tendrils, unnaturally long and sharp, pouring across the valleys toward the strongholds of Volkov and Corvus. The peace was broken, but what came was not the familiar clash of steel and banners of old. It was something far worse. The Whispering One, its pact betrayed, unleashed its true form. The shadows were not just shadows. They were its extensions, physical manifestations of its hunger and rage. They swept through villages, not killing, but consuming. People touched by the tendrils didn't bleed. They simply faded, their colors draining away, their substance turning to gray dust, their voices silenced forever. The entity wasn't just a predator. It was an eraser of existence. Panic seized the two houses. The alliance, forged in a moment of desperate hope, was immediately tested by overwhelming terror. Their guards and soldiers were useless against an enemy that had no body, an enemy that was the absence of light itself. Lord Valeris and Lady Serafina watched in horror as their lands were slowly being unmade. The price of their defiance was the potential annihilation of everything they had sought to protect. Amidst the chaos, it was Kael and Alara who stepped forward. Bound by their new vows and a shared, terrifying destiny, they knew they were the cause of this devastation. Scouring ancient texts kept hidden in their respective libraries, they discovered the truth of the Whispering One. It was not a god or a demon, but a primal entity of entropy and silence, drawn to the chaos of the war centuries ago. It fed on strong emotions, on life force itself. The pact hadn't been a demand for sacrifice. It had been a carefully negotiated containment. The biannual offering of potent, youthful life force was just enough to keep it placated, to keep its hunger focused on a single point. By breaking the pact, they hadn't just angered it. They had untethered it. Its hunger was now boundless, and it sought to consume all of Eldoria. The text spoke of only one way to counter it, not with a tribute of life, but with an anchor of immense, focused energy. Something that could bind it once more. Kael, the quiet boy with the old soul, understood. He had the calm and discipline of the Volkov line. Alara, the fiery spirit, possessed the unyielding passion of the Corvus lineage. Together, they embodied a balance. Their union, the very act that had broken the pact, was also the potential key to forging a new one. They realized they needed to create an anchor, a beacon of life so powerful it would draw the entity in and hold it. With their parents' blessings, they rode not to the Gloomwood, but to the highest peak in Eldoria, the Sunstone Spire, a place said to be the first to greet the dawn. As the shadows swarmed up the mountainside, Kael and Alara began a ritual described in the texts. It was not a ritual of death, but of life. They joined hands, focusing their energy, their love, their hopes for the future, and the combined lineage of their two houses into a single point of brilliant light. The light erupted from the spire, a pure white beacon against the encroaching darkness. The shrieking of the Whispering One intensified as the light seared its shadowy form. It was a battle of wills, of existence against oblivion. The shadow recoiled, drawn to the beacon but also repelled by its purity. It couldn't consume the light, but it couldn't ignore it either. The tendrils of darkness converged on the Sunstone Spire, wrapping around its base, trying to smother the light but unable to extinguish its source. As dawn broke, a new, strange equilibrium was found. The Whispering One was not defeated, but it was contained once more. It was now bound to the Sunstone Spire, anchored by the living energy of Kael and Alara's union. The shadows receded from the valleys, coalescing into a permanent, writhing storm around the peak, a constant, visible reminder of the pact. Eldoria was saved from total annihilation, but it was forever changed. The peace was no longer paid for with the lives of children, but maintained by the constant vigil of the united house of Volkov Corvus. The Sunstone Spire, once a symbol of hope, was now a monument to their eternal duty. Kael and Alara, the children who were supposed to be sacrificed, became the guardians of the new pact, their love the lock and their lineage the key. The land was at peace, a true and lasting peace, but every sunrise cast the long, dancing shadow of the spire across the valley, a silent testament to the fact that some darkness can never be vanquished, only contained. And the people of Eldoria learned a hard lesson. That true peace is not the absence of a threat, but the courage to face it, together, day after day. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more tales from the shadows. In the shifting sands of Egypt, where tombs of pharaohs and nobles cry out to be remembered, one discovery defied everything we thought we knew. It was a tomb with no name, a silent void in a valley that prided itself on eternal life through memory. Most burials, even the humblest, bore inscriptions, names, titles, prayers to the gods. To be named was to live again. This tomb offered nothing. Its entrance, half swallowed by centuries of sand, was marked only by a raw, uncarved stone. No hieroglyphs, no blessings for Anubis. It was as if its occupant had been deliberately erased from existence itself. The excavation crew hesitated, not out of fear of ancient curses, but because something felt profoundly wrong. Every Egyptian burial, no matter how ravaged by time or looters, was an invitation. The dead reached out through art and text, begging the living to speak their names, to keep their souls alive. But this tomb pushed back. When the heavy blocking stones were finally pried away, the air that rushed out wasn't stale. It was sharp, biting, like stone scraped raw. There were no offering jars, no funerary goods, no signs of robbery. The corridor plunged steeply into the earth, its walls unnervingly bare, but it was the floor that stopped them cold. It was gouged with deep, irregular grooves, as if something had tried to claw its way out. The marks grew deeper, more frantic, the closer they got to the burial chamber. Inside, a single, plain limestone sarcophagus stood in stark isolation. No gold, no inscriptions, no honor. The canopic jars, meant to hold the vital organs for the afterlife, were missing. This wasn't a burial born of poverty. This was a punishment. When the heavy lid was lifted, the mummy inside was perfectly intact, wrapped in layers of linen, but with no protective amulets, no scarab over the heart, no spells for the journey ahead. Most terrifying of all, the ritual to open the mouth, allowing the soul to speak and eat in the next world, had never been performed. And the name, the single most essential key to eternity, was nowhere to be found. For the ancient Egyptians, this was a fate worse than death itself. To die unnamed was to be severed from the afterlife. Without a name, the Ba, the part of the soul that could travel, couldn't return to the body. Without inscriptions, the Ka, the life force, couldn't receive offerings. Without the magic spells, the soul was trapped, unable to pass the gates of the underworld, unable to join the blessed dead. It would remain aware, intact, and eternally incomplete. A soul without a name doesn't just fade away, it lingers. Scholars debated its meaning. Was this a traitor? A criminal so vile that their very memory had to be annihilated? Damnatio memoria, a curse of forgottenness. The local villagers, however, had a simpler, more chilling name for the mummy, Khephren. It wasn't its real name, because it had none. Khephren, the unfinished one, the broken cycle, the thing that should not be. They refused to go anywhere near the tomb, a dread passed down through generations. The mystery of the scratch marks on the walls deepened. Grave robbers couldn't have made them. They ran upward toward the sealed entrance, getting more desperate the closer they came to the surface. It looked as if someone had been clawing their way up from inside a sealed tomb over and over again, as if whatever lay in that sarcophagus had never stopped trying to get out. An examination of the mummy revealed the same horrific damage. Beneath the linen wrappings, the finger bones were worn smooth, ground down as if scraped against stone for an eternity. The wrappings around the hands were shredded from the inside. Yet the sarcophagus lid was intact. No exit had ever been forced open. The chilling conclusion was that all this damage had happened asterisk after asterisk the burial. The first night the archaeologists camped near the tomb, a worker awoke from a nightmare, his fingernails raw and bleeding. He dreamt of scratching. Soon, others had the same dream. Suffocating darkness, the feel of stone against their skin, an overwhelming urgency with no goal. They dreamed of a name just beyond their grasp, a vital piece of themselves missing. One man woke up screaming a word in a language no one recognized. It hung in the air like a discordant note, a sound that felt inherently wrong. The lead scholars dismissed it all as mass hysteria, stress, the power of suggestion. They doubled the guards and pressed on with their work. Then the sounds began. Not a dramatic wail, but a slow, rhythmic rasping. A faint scratching echoing from deep within the stone at night. It always came from below, from the direction of the tomb, and it always stopped the moment anyone tried to investigate. Sophisticated recording equipment picked up nothing but silence. The local workers, their faces pale with ancestral fear, refused to stay after sunset. They said the soul was waking up. An old woman from a nearby village tried to explain. "It was buried awake," she whispered to a researcher, "not in body." In knowing, she said that without the proper rites, the soul would awaken in total darkness, fully conscious, trapped in its corpse, unable to move on, unable to die. It would try to get out, she said, her eyes wide with a certainty that defied science. Anyone would. On the 15th day of the excavation, a graduate student vanished. His footprints led directly to the edge of the burial chamber and then simply stopped. There was no sign of a struggle, no evidence he had ever left. All that remained was a single, fresh scratch mark on the stone floor, deep and unmistakably made by a human hand. That was the final straw. The excavation was immediately halted. Officials ordered the tomb to be resealed. The mummy was left where it lay, the sarcophagus lid lowered, the blocking stones pushed back into place, entombing the horror once more. That night, everyone for a mile around had the exact same dream. They were in a narrow chamber, the walls scarred and bleeding stone. Their hands were scraping until linen tore and bone ground against rock. And a voice, not heard but felt, a desperate pressure inside their minds, pleaded with an unbearable insistence, "Remember me," but there was no name to remember. The next morning, a chilling discovery was made. The grooves on the corridor walls were deeper, they were fresh. As if the attention, the brief moment of being known, had renewed its strength. The tomb was sealed permanently, no markers were placed. No official report was ever published. The official story was that the site was geologically unstable. But privately, no one involved ever wanted to speak of it again. To name it was to give it shape. And to give it shape was to give it permission to exist. Even today, the locals shun that part of the valley. They say animals refuse to walk on that ground. After heavy rains, new scratch marks are sometimes found on the exposed rock, leading from nowhere to nowhere. They say the soul of Khephren still wanders. Not the mummy, not a ghost, but the essential part of a person that was denied its peace. A soul without a name cannot rest, it does not sleep, it waits. And in the suffocating silence beneath the stone, it scratches. Not to escape, but to be known. Thanks for watching. If stories of the unknown fascinate you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. The Mirror Witch Trial, the first accusation did not involve magic, it involved silence. In the village of Velen Hollow, mirrors were rare. Glass was costly, difficult to produce, and easily broken on the rough roads that threaded through the hills. Most homes relied on polished metal or still water to glimpse their own faces. True mirrors backed with silver, framed in wood were objects of trade, inheritance, and quiet pride. Morella owned 3. She was a widow, childless, and lived at the far edge of the village where the forest crept close enough to breathe dampness into her walls. She made a modest living repairing garments and cleaning for wealthier households. No one could say she was unkind. No one could say she was generous either. She kept to herself, spoke little, and asked nothing from anyone. It was said she liked to look at herself. That was the first sin. The second came when a child claimed his reflection blinked. He was 7, the son of a cooper, sent to Morella's house with his mother's mended cloak. While waiting, he wandered into the narrow sitting room where one of her mirrors hung tall, dark-framed, its surface faintly warped by age. Later, trembling and pale, he told his mother that the boy in the glass had smiled when he had not. The mother struck him for lying. But the story did not die. Within weeks, others noticed things they could not easily name. A woman swore her reflection lagged by half a breath. A man claimed the mirror in Morella's house showed him standing slightly closer than he truly was. Someone else said they heard whispering when no one stood before the glass. Fear grows best when watered by uncertainty. Soon, the word which was spoken not loudly, not formally, but often, in doorways, in low voices after prayers. The priest cautioned restraint, yet he too had heard the rumors. He advised Mirela to remove the mirrors to quiet the village. She refused. "They are only glass," she said. "They show what is already there." That answer did her no favors. The first death followed. An elderly man, known for drink and temper, was found collapsed in his home. His wife claimed that moments before, he had been shouting at his reflection in a polished basin, screaming that it would not stop staring at him. When she turned the basin over, she swore she heard a sound like breath escaping. The priest ordered an inquiry. Mirela was summoned. The trial was held in the meeting hall, its windows thrown open as if fresh air could cleanse suspicion. Villagers packed the benches, eyes bright with fear and excitement. They brought their stories eagerly, overlapping and contradictory, united only by the presence of mirrors. "She traps them," someone said. "Souls? That's why the reflections move. Mirrors are doors," another insisted. "Everyone knows that." Mirela stood alone before them, her hands bound loosely, her face unreadable. "I have trapped nothing," she said. "You fear yourselves." The magistrate sent from the nearest city side and rubbed his temples. He had heard such cases before. Most dissolved under scrutiny. Panic made monsters easily. "Bring the evidence," he said. So they brought a mirror. It was Mirela's smallest one, taken from her house by the guards. Oval-shaped, with a thin wooden frame worn smooth by time. Its surface reflected the hall imperfectly, bending faces just enough to make them seem unfamiliar. "This mirror," the cooper's wife said, stepping forward, "showed my son smiling when he was afraid." The magistrate examined it, turned it side to side. He saw only his own lined face. "There is nothing here," he said. "It is glass." At that moment, a murmur spread through the hall. Someone near the back screamed. The mirror still held upright showed the magistrate standing alone. But in the reflection, Mirela stood beside him. She did not move in the hall. She did not speak. Her reflected face was closer than it should have been, her eyes fixed on the magistrate with an intensity that made his breath catch. "Enough," he said sharply, though his voice wavered. "This proves nothing." "Smash it." The guards hesitated. Mirela lifted her head. "Do not," she said. For the first time, fear entered her voice. "You do not understand what you are breaking." The hall went silent. The magistrate, pale now, nodded to a guard. The mirror was raised. When it shattered against the stone floor, the sound was not what anyone expected. It was not a clean crack, not the tinkling rain of glass. It was a wet, concussive noise, like something bursting under pressure. 3 people collapsed instantly. A woman near the front bench fell without a sound, eyes wide, mouth open. A guard dropped his spear and crumpled as if his bones had turned to ash. The cooper's wife screamed once before her knees buckled, her body striking the floor with a hollow thud. They did not move again. Panic erupted. People surged toward the doors, trampling benches, screaming prayers. The magistrate stumbled backward, slipping on shards of glass that gleamed unnaturally dull. The priest fell to his knees, shouting absolution into the chaos. Mirela did not flee. She stared at the broken mirror, at the fragments scattered across the stone. In each piece, a sliver of movement flickered too fast to see clearly, too slow to dismiss. "They were not empty," she whispered. "You never are. The survivors never recovered. Their bodies lived breathing, warm, but their eyes remained fixed, unblinking. No light returned to them, no voice. Healers called it shock, then possession, then stopped naming it at all. The verdict came swiftly: witchcraft, soul-binding, heresy. Mirela was executed at dawn. She did not curse the village. She did not confess. When the noose was placed around her neck, she looked once toward the rising sun and said only, "You should have covered them." Afterward, mirrors were outlawed. Every reflective surface was smashed glass, polished metal, water basins drained and scoured. Households complied eagerly. The fragments were gathered, carted beyond the fields, and buried deep. Children were taught not to stare at still water. New houses were built with rough stone walls and dull fixtures. The village survived, but it was changed. People avoided looking too closely at one another. They learned to avert their eyes in conversation. Dreams were filled with faces half seen, expressions unfinished. Over generations, the band became tradition, then law, then instinct. When the village was eventually abandoned, claimed by famine, then by time travelers noted something strange. No reflective surfaces remained. Not even by accident. Excavations centuries later revealed layers of broken glass buried beneath the ruins, as if the ground itself had swallowed them. Mirrors shattered and hidden with deliberate care, sealed beneath soil and stone. Scholars debate the truth of the mirror witch trial, mass hysteria, toxic glass. Coincidence magnified by fear. But no one has successfully restored a mirror in Velin Hollow. Those who try report the same sensation, a pressure behind the eyes, a sense of being watched from a place just out of sight. As if reflections, once denied long enough, learn to look back without glass. And the land remembers what it was forced to hide. The executioner was not remembered for mercy. His name appears only once in the city's surviving ledgers, written in a cramped clerk's hand beside a column of payments for services rendered. No surname, no honorific. Just a sum of coin issued regularly, reliably for nearly 30 years. Enough time to end hundreds of lives. In the medieval city, executions were public necessities. They were theater, warning, ritual cleansing. The executioner was both reviled and indispensable and touchable in the streets, yet summoned by the state whenever blood was required to remind the living of order. People did not look him in the eye. That, perhaps, was where it began. He lived alone at the edge of the city, in a narrow house pressed against the outer wall, close enough that the stone bled cold through the floors in winter. Children dared each other to knock on his door and run. Merchants pretended not to see him when he passed. Even priests spoke to him with eyes averted, as though sight itself might be contagious. Yet the condemned always looked at him. Bound, kneeling, choking on prayers or curses, they searched his face in their final moments. Some pleaded, some raged. Some stared with an intensity that felt heavier than hands, heavier than chains. The executioner noticed this early on, long before the rumors. It was said that he performed his work cleanly, that his blade was sharp, that he did not prolong suffering unless ordered. These things were true. What the rumors failed to mention was how carefully he studied the condemned beforehand, not their crimes, not their confessions, but their eyes. He learned the differences. Fear clouded the eye, turning it dull and unfocused. Rage sharpened it, made it bright and fevered. The faithful held something else entirely, an inward gaze, already turning away from the world. The eyes changed at death. This was not superstition, it was observation. In the moment after the body stilled, before the crowd exhaled and turned away, the eyes fixed themselves. Whatever had animated them fled, leaving behind a final shape, a residue of intent, frozen like a footprint in cooling wax. Most executioners looked away at that moment. He did not. The first eye he took was an accident. A young man convicted of treason, barely more than a boy. When the blade fell, the executioner noticed that one eye remained open, staring upward, unblinking, catching the pale winter light. Something about it unsettled him. Not the gore, not the violence, but the sense that the eye was still engaged, still looking. Later, as the body was prepared for burial, the executioner lingered. No one challenged him. No one ever did. With a small knife used usually for sharpening tools, he removed the eye. He expected revulsion. Instead, he felt relief. At home, he placed the eye in a small jar of oil used for treating leather. The fluid clouded at first, then cleared. The eye floated, intact, its surface glossy, reflecting candlelight. It did not rot. He began to experiment. Some eyes collapsed within days, turning milky and soft. Others endured. The difference, he realized, lay not in the method, but in the moment they were taken. Too late, and the eye lost its shape. Too soon, and it darkened. There was a precise interval of breath held between death and absence, when the eye could be preserved, when it could be kept. The rumors began slowly. People whispered that the executioner lingered too long after his work, that he requested the bodies be left with him, that animals avoided his house, that no birds nested near his roof. A midwife claimed she saw jars through his window, dozens of them, lined on shelves like offerings. She crossed herself and never spoke to him again. The executioner did not deny any of it. He did not confirm it either. He simply continued. Over the years, his collection grew, men and women. Old and young, criminals, heretics, political enemies. Each eye was different. Some reflected nothing but dull glass. Others seemed to catch light, even in darkness, their surfaces alive with a subtle depth that made looking away difficult. He arranged them carefully, not by date, not by crime, by gaze. Eyes that had pleaded were kept together. Eyes that had defied him sat on another shelf. The faithful were placed highest, where candle smoke drifted closest to the ceiling. He spent hours studying them, holding the jars up to the light, turning them slowly. Sometimes, only sometimes, he felt watched. Not by the living, by the dead. It became his private belief that the eyes retained something essential. Not souls, not consciousness, but attention. The final direction of a person's awareness, trapped and preserved. The dead continued to watch the living. And the living, he reasoned, deserved to be seen. When age bent his back and weakened his grip, the executioner prepared his legacy. He transferred the eyes from fragile jars into thicker glass vessels, sealed with wax and leather. When his hands shook too badly, he stopped adding to the collection. When he died, there was no ceremony. His house was emptied, his belongings sold. Most of what he owned was unremarkable. No one thought to dig beneath the floorboards, where a small cellar door lay hidden beneath a rotting rug. Centuries passed, the city changed names. Walls were torn down and rebuilt. The executioner's house was demolished, replaced by offices, then by a courthouse whose foundations cut deep into older stone. During renovations mandated repairs to crumbling supports, a worker's pick struck wood, not rotten. Not collapsed, locked. The box was rectangular, reinforced with iron bands, its surface darkened by age. No markings adorned it, no sigils, no names. It took effort to pry it open. Inside were dozens of glass vessels packed tightly together. And inside those eyes, human eyes. Preserved, intact, floating in clear oil that had somehow resisted time. Their colors varied: brown, blue, gray, but all shared the same orientation. They faced upward. The workers recoiled. One dropped the lid and fled the chamber. Another crossed himself repeatedly, whispering prayers. The foreman ordered the box sealed and removed to a secure room. Scholars were summoned, historians, clergy. No record explained the collection. The eyes could not be dated precisely, but their condition suggested careful preservation far beyond common practice. No known religious tradition accounted for it. No documented punishment involved such trophies. And yet, when left alone in a lit room, observers reported a sensation difficult to articulate. A pressure behind the eyes. A feeling of being assessed, measured. One archivist claimed that, after hours cataloging the vessels, she dreamed of standing in a crowd, unable to move, while unseen figures watched her from every direction. Another swore the eyes shifted when no one was looking. There were no official findings. The box was quietly reburied beneath reinforced stone. The renovation plans were altered. Records were sealed under preservation statutes. The courthouse reopened on schedule. But guards working late shifts sometimes report discomfort in the lower levels, an urge to turn around. A feeling that something is behind them, watching, patient, and unblinking. They never go down alone. Some things, the city decided, do not need to see the light again. And some eyes, once open at the moment of death, never truly close. The newspapers called it a curse because they did not know what else to call it. When the tomb was open, no thunder split the sky. No plague swept through the camps. No explorers collapsed screaming beneath invisible hands. The air that rushed out was dry and stale, smelling of old dust and resin, and the men who entered walked back into the sun on their own feet. That was the first mistake. The tomb belonged to Pharaoh Khepri-Enk, a ruler of the late dynasties, one whose reign had been unremarkable by history's standards. No great conquests. No pyramids raised in his name. His burial site was modest compared to the giants of the past, hidden beneath a low ridge of stone and sand that centuries had flattened almost to nothing. Yet the seals were intact. That alone was enough to draw attention. The expedition consisted of 12 people, archaeologists, laborers, scribes, and guards. They descended together into the earth, lanterns bobbing like captured stars, speaking in hushed tones as if the stone itself might be listening. The corridors were narrow. The walls slanted inward in places, forcing shoulders to brush carved reliefs worn smooth by time. Hieroglyphs covered every surface, prayers, warnings, invocations to gods whose names had fallen out of living memory. One inscription appeared again and again. "I do not remain behind." No one could agree on its meaning. They reached the burial chamber by mid-afternoon. The sarcophagus lay unopened, the pharaoh's likeness carved into its lid, eyes wide and watching. Offerings still surrounded it, broken pottery, dried flowers, gold untouched by thieves, a miracle of preservation. They documented everything. They did not open the sarcophagus that day. That night, the first man dreamed of the corridor. He was a junior surveyor, young, eager, sleeping in a canvas tent beneath a sky crowded with stars. In his dream, he stood alone in a narrow passageway, stone walls pressing close enough that he could feel their cold breath against his skin. At the far end stood a doorplane, undecorated, shut tight. He walked toward it. No matter how long he walked, it did not grow closer. He woke gasping, his heart racing, convinced for a moment that the tent walls were closing in. He told no one. By the third night, 5 of them had dreamed it. The corridor was always the same. The walls always moving, inch by inch. The door always present, always unreachable. No voices, no figures. Just the sound of one's own breathing, too loud, too fast. They laughed about it at breakfast, uneasily. Shared dreams were not unheard of, they told themselves. The mind played tricks in strange places. Ancient tombs inspired imagination. The tomb was sealed again 2 weeks later. Artifacts were cataloged and removed. The entrance was reinforced to protect it from looters. The expedition returned home with photographs, sketches, and cautious excitement. Life resumed. The dreams did not stop. Some of the survivors dreamed every night, others only once a month. A few claimed they never dreamed at all until, years later, they did. The corridor came without warning, slipping into sleep like a memory rather than a nightmare. The walls crept closer each time. Doctors were consulted, sleep specialists, neurologists, psychiatrists. Diagnoses were offered and withdrawn. Stress, trauma, suggestibility. A shared narrative reinforced by early conversations. Pills were prescribed, therapy attempted, nothing changed the dream. What disturbed the physicians most was not the dream itself, but its consistency. The survivors, interviewed separately, described the same dimensions, the same texture of stone, the same suffocating sense of forward motion without progress. Even the sound of footsteps echoed in the same way. More unsettling still was the timeline. The corridor was shortening, not quickly, not dramatically, but imperceptibly, night by night, year by year. The door, once impossibly distant, began to seem closer, still unreachable, but no longer infinite. The survivors aged. One died in a car accident at 43, another from pneumonia in her 60s. A third lived into his 80s, sharp-minded and physically healthy to the end. Their deaths were ordinary, unremarkable, but in the weeks before each death, the dreams intensified. Sleep journals encouraged by researchers revealed the same pattern. The walls pressed tighter. Breathing became difficult even after waking. Some woke with bruises on their arms as if pressed against stone. Others developed a terror of enclosed spaces they had never known before. In their final entries, several mentioned the door. "It's closer now," one wrote. "I can almost touch it." Another wrote only, "I hear something behind it." Public interest flared briefly, then faded. A curse that did not kill spectacularly did not hold attention for long. Skeptics dismissed the accounts as coincidence amplified by myth. Believers argued that the pharaoh's vengeance was subtle, patient. The truth lay somewhere quieter. One man remained. His name was Elias Morin, the expedition's lead epigrapher. He had been the first to translate the repeated inscription, "I do not remain behind." At the time, he had taken it to mean spiritual transcendence, the soul's refusal to linger in death. Now, in his 90s, he was no longer so certain. Elias outlived them all. His mind stayed clear long after his body began to fail. He moved into a care facility overlooking the sea, where the hallways were wide and the rooms filled with light. He insisted on sleeping with the curtains open. He continued to dream. In his journal, written in a careful, shaking hand, he documented the corridor's progress with academic precision, measurements, estimates, comparisons to earlier dreams. He refused to dramatize, refused to speculate until the last year. "The walls are close enough to touch now," he wrote. "I feel them even when I wake." Nurses noted his increasing agitation at night. He would wake shouting, clawing at the bedsheets, convinced he was being crushed. Scans showed no abnormalities. His heart remained strong. He began refusing to lie flat. "I need room," he told them. "I need space." They moved his bed away from the walls. It did not help. In his final months, Elias stopped dreaming of walking. In the corridor, he could no longer move forward. The walls had narrowed until progress was impossible. The door loomed just ahead, close enough to see the grain of the wood, the imperfections in its surface. Still closed, still silent. "I think," he wrote, "that the corridor is not meant to be escaped." The last entry was dated 3 days before his death. "I am almost at the door." Elias Morin died quietly in his sleep. No autopsy revealed anything unusual. Within a year, the tomb of Keperank was sealed again, this time permanently. The artifacts were returned. The entrance buried beneath reinforced stone and sand. Official statements cited preservation concerns, ethical considerations, respect for the dead. Unofficially, no one wanted to follow. Sometimes, in academic circles, the curse is discussed in careful language. Shared psychological trauma. Cultural contamination of memory. The power of expectation. But there is one detail no theory explains. The inscription, "I do not remain behind," appeared only in corridors leading away from the burial chamber. Never toward it. And in every recorded dream, the door stood at the far end, waiting not to open, but to be reached. As if something, once buried, had been walking forward ever since. The undying king did not fear death, he feared silence. He had ruled for 57 years, long enough for entire generations to be born knowing no other crown, long enough for his name to be carved into stone so deeply that it felt older than the mountains themselves. His laws shaped rivers. His wars redrew horizons. Yet every oracle, every ash reader and bonecaster spoke the same truth when pressed hard enough. Kingdoms rot when their kings do. The king listened, he always listened. And he believed he had found the answer. To rule forever, a king must not rule alone. The prophecy did not say how only that eternity required union. So the king did what kings have always done when faced with the unknowable. He made it ritual, made it holy, made it irreversible. His bride was chosen in spring. She was 17, small-framed and sharp-eyed, the daughter of a provincial governor whose loyalty had never wavered. The priests praised her bloodline. The augurs praised the way her shadow fell at noon. No one asked her if she wished to marry a man older than her grandfather, whose hair was already silvered with the dust of tombs yet to be built. When she was told, she bowed. That was the first lesson she learned, as queen obedience is mistaken for grace. The wedding lasted 9 days. Gold banners were hung from every tower. White doves were released until the sky itself seemed consecrated. The bride wore silk layered with hammered gold, so heavy she could barely lift her arms. Her crown was thin and ceremonial, for she was not meant to rule the living. That honor belonged to the king alone. At the altar, the high priest spoke of devotion beyond breath, of love that would not end at the grave. The king's voice was steady when he swore his vows. Hers trembled, but the music was loud and no one heard it. That night, the king touched her hands and said, almost kindly, "You will be remembered forever." She did not yet understand that remembrance is not mercy. The years passed. She learned the corridors of the palace, the quiet ways to make herself small. She learned that the king visited her chamber rarely, and when he did, his mind was elsewhere, on the future, on monuments, on the great stone tomb being carved beneath the capital. She was less wife than symbol, less woman than key. The priests came often. They spoke to her of preparation, of purification, of her sacred role. She fasted when told. She prayed when told. They taught her the chants meant to guide a soul through the dark between worlds. She was praised for her calm, for her pale composure. They never asked if she believed. The king aged slowly, stubbornly, as if sheer will could hold decay at bay. But even will bends. When he died, the city mourned in rehearsed grief. Bells rang for a full week, markets closed. Children were named after him. And beneath the palace, the final ritual was set in motion. The bride was dressed one last time. Gold and white again, wedding colors, funeral colors, eternity's uniform. Her hair was braided with charms meant to ward off fear. The priests anointed her lips so her words would carry through death. Someone pressed a cup into her hands and told her it would calm her heart. She asked very quietly, "When will I wake?" No one answered. The tomb was a cathedral of stone, vast and flawless, carved with scenes of the king's victories. His sarcophagus rested at its center, sealed in black marble veined with gold. Torches burned along the walls, their flames bending strangely as if the air itself resisted. The bride was led inside. She walked beside the king's body, laid out in splendor, his face serene in death in a way it had never been in life. The priests recited the final prayers. They told her she would guide him, that her love would light his path beyond the veil, that she would not be alone. The stone door began to close. Panic, when it came, was not loud. It was a tightening, a sudden understanding too large for the body to hold. She turned, took a step, then another. Her mouth opened, but the words tangled with the chants echoing off the walls. The door sealed. Darkness fell like a verdict. At first, she did as she had been taught. She sat beside the king's tomb and spoke the guiding words, her voice trembling, then cracking, then fading. She waited for a sign, for warmth, for light, for the promised crossing. None came. Hours passed, or days. Time loosened its grip. The air grew thin. The torches died. The silence pressed in, intimate and merciless. She tried to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, the dark seemed to move closer. She began to understand. The king was gone. Whatever eternity awaited him, it did not require her voice. The priests had lied or believed their own lies. The tomb was not a bridge, it was a lock. Hunger came first, then thirst. She screamed then. She beat her hands against the stone until pain bloomed and faded into numbness. Her voice broke apart in the vastness, swallowed by walls that had never been meant to answer. At some point, she crawled away from the king's sarcophagus, not in hatred, not even in fear, in instinct. When her body finally failed, it did so facing the wall, as far from him as the tomb allowed. Her fingernails scraped at the stone long after her strength was gone. Her jaw remained open, frozen in a question that would never be answered. Centuries passed. Dynasties rose and fell. The undying king became a legend, then a lesson, then a name scholars argued over. When the tomb was finally opened, when light spilled into that sealed darkness for the first time in generations, the explorers found exactly what they expected. The king lay undisturbed, perfect, regal, eternal, and beside him, they found her. Turned away, small bones curled inward, fingertips worn to nothing, gold dulled by time, white cloth rotted into dust. Her mouth still open. No inscriptions mentioned her name. The stone had kept its promise. Death had not honored the romance. The relic was no larger than that of a child's hand, yet its presence weighed heavily on the air around it. Mummified flesh clung tightly to bone, the fingers curled inward as if mid-gesture, frozen between command and guidance. Layers of linen wrapped it carefully, each strip darkened by centuries of oils, resins, and the slow decay of time. Faded hieroglyphs were still visible on the innermost bandages, ink pressed deliberately into cloth by a priest's steady hand long before the last dynasty fell. It was not attached to any body. That absence unsettled scholars more than the relic itself. In the burial traditions of ancient Kemet, nothing was removed without purpose. The body was a sacred vessel, mapped carefully for the soul's journey through Duat, the shadowed realm between death and rebirth. Every organ had meaning. Every cut carried consequence. And yet, ancient fragments, half-burned papyri, temple wall inscriptions shattered by conquest spoke in hushed, indirect language of a ritual called the severing of the guide. The text never named the relic directly. They only described the hand that leads when the eyes can no longer see. According to these writings, certain souls were believed to wander after death not wicked enough for destruction. yet too burdened by fear, guilt, or unfinished memory to pass judgment unaided. For them, priests invoked Anubis himself, not merely as judge or embalmer, but as Sekopomp, the silent guide. In rare and dangerous ceremonies, a symbolic part of the god was fashioned to escort such souls safely to the scales of Ma-8. The hand was cut, wrapped, sealed, and hidden. Most scholars dismissed the accounts as allegory, until the relic was found. It was uncovered beneath the ruins of a desert shrine whose name had been erased from maps and memory alike. The structure had collapsed inward centuries earlier, swallowed by sand and silence. Beneath its foundation, buried deeper than any normal cache, rested a small wooden chest reinforced with bronze bands etched with jackal motifs. No curse warnings marked it. No prayers adorned its lid. Inside lay the hand. Carbon dating placed the linen at over 3,000 years old. The preservation was unnatural even by Egyptian standards. No known embalming technique could account for the condition of the flesh, dry, intact, faintly warm to the touch. Chemical analysis revealed traces of resins not found in any burial site, along with unknown organic compounds that defied classification. When the lead archaeologist first lifted it from the chest, witnesses reported he froze mid-motion. His breath caught, his grip loosened, though he did not drop it. Later, when asked what he felt, he struggled to find words. "Not cold," he said, "not heat, pressure, like someone had taken my hand and was gently steering me somewhere." The sensation ended the moment the relic was set down. That night he dreamed of corridors. They stretched endlessly in all directions, carved from stone the color of old bone. The air smelled of incense and dust. No doors lined the halls, yet he knew each passage led somewhere important. In the distance, always just beyond sight, echoed the slow creak of a massive scale shifting its weight. He awoke before dawn, his right hand numb and tingling, fingers curled as though they had been clasped around something unseen. Others began to dream as well. Anyone who spent prolonged time near the relic experienced the same visions: corridors, murmured prayers in a language they did not understand, the distant presence of something vast and patient. None saw Anubis himself. None reached the end of the halls, but all woke with the same lingering certainty. They had been moving forward, guided. A junior conservator attempted to catalog the relic in isolation, sealing it within a glass chamber for study. After 6 hours alone, he emerged pale and shaken. He resigned the following day without explanation. Weeks later, he was found alive but unresponsive in his apartment, seated upright in a chair, hands folded neatly in his lap. No cause of his catatonia was ever identified. The relic was transferred quietly to a private collection. The last known owner was a reclusive antiquities dealer with a reputation for impeccable provenance and discreet clients. He acquired the hand through sealed negotiations and installed it in a climate-controlled chamber within his study. Visitors reported an overwhelming sense of calm upon entering the room, and almost reverent stillness, as though raised voices or hurried movements would be inappropriate. The dealer himself changed over time. He slept less, yet appeared rested. His conversations grew softer, more deliberate. He spoke often of balance, of order, of how fear distorted the soul's true weight. When asked about the relic, he smiled faintly and said only, "It is not meant for the living to own. Only to hold, briefly." On the evening of his death, no signs of distress were found. He was discovered the following morning, seated upright in his chair before the relic's chamber. The glass had been opened from the inside. The hand of Anubis rested in his right palm, fingers aligned perfectly with his own, as though the two had been meant to fit together. His expression was peaceful. Medical examiners found no trauma, no toxins, no irregularities. His heart had simply stopped, quietly, at some point during the night. Rigor mortis had not disturbed his posture. It was as if death itself had arrived, taken his hand, and waited patiently while he followed. The relic vanished soon after. No theft was reported, no alarms triggered. The chamber was found empty, the linen fragments that once wrapped the hand reduced to fine dust scattered across the floor. Only a faint impression remained on the velvet stand where it had rested, shaped unmistakably like a guiding palm. Some believe the hand fulfilled its purpose. Others fear it has merely moved onto another soul standing unknowingly at the threshold, waiting for guidance through the endless corridors toward judgment. Ancient texts warn that Anubis does not hurry. He waits, and when the time is right, he reaches out not to pull, but to lead, gently. Our journey begins in the year 1421 in a small, isolated convent in the heart of rural France. The convent of Saint-Germain-le-Pauvre was a place of quiet devotion, home to a small community of nuns dedicated to a life of prayer and solitude. Among them was a young woman named Amélie. By all accounts, she was ordinary, pious, quiet, and unremarkable. But Sister Amélie harbored a secret, a phenomenon so unnatural that it would eventually lead to the downfall of her entire community. It started subtly. A fellow nun, while sweeping the cloister at dusk, noticed something odd. As Sister Amélie walked past a torchlit wall, her shadow seemed to waver. The nun blinked, thinking her eyes were playing tricks on her in the flickering light. But the next evening she saw it again, and this time she was certain. Amélie's shadow wasn't just one shadow. It was two. One shadow was perfectly normal, mimicking her every move as a shadow should. But the other, a darker, more elongated twin, moved with a slight delay, sometimes twisting into shapes that didn't match Amélie's form at all. The nun kept her discovery to herself at first, terrified of what it might mean. Was she going mad? Or was she witnessing something truly unholy? Her silence didn't last long. Soon, other nuns began to notice. Whispers filled the cold stone corridors of Saint-Germain-le-Pauvre. The split shadow became a source of fear and fascination. Some nuns would secretly follow Amélie, hoping to catch a glimpse of the phenomenon. They observed that it only happened in low light, when sources like candles or the setting sun cast long, deep shadows. In the bright light of midday, Amélie was just like them. But as twilight descended, her spectral twin would emerge. The second shadow was described as inkier and more active than the first. While one shadow would be still as Amélie prayed, the other might seem to twitch or slowly creep along the wall, independent of her body. The nuns were terrified. They began to avoid Amélie, crossing themselves whenever she passed. The convent, once a place of peaceful community, was now fractured by suspicion and fear. Amélie herself became increasingly withdrawn, aware of the whispers and the fearful glances. Imagine the torment she must have felt, haunted by a phenomenon she couldn't control or explain. The Mother Superior of the convent, a stern and pragmatic woman named Mother Isabel, could not ignore the growing hysteria. At first, she dismissed the stories as fanciful gossip, the product of overactive imaginations in a cloistered environment. She reprimanded the nuns for spreading such tales. But one evening, she decided to see for herself. She summoned Sister Amélie to her private study, lighting only a single candle on her desk. As Amélie entered and stood before her, Mother Isabel watched the wall behind her, and she saw it. The solid, normal shadow of the young nun, and beside it, a second, darker silhouette that seemed to writhe and stretch of its own accord. The sight struck a chord of primal fear in the seasoned abbess. This was no trick of the light. This was something else entirely. Mother Isabel knew she could no longer handle this internally. The situation was beyond the scope of convent discipline. It was a matter for the church itself. With a heavy heart, she penned a letter to the regional bishop, detailing the strange and disturbing events surrounding Sister Amélie and her split shadow. She wrote of the fear gripping her community and her own personal confirmation of the unnatural phenomenon. The letter, carried by a trusted messenger, would set in motion a chain of events that would seal the fate of the convent forever. The church, in this era, did not take such reports lightly. Accusations of witchcraft and demonic influence were rampant, and any sign of the unnatural was treated with the utmost seriousness. The bishop's response was swift and severe. He dispatched two of his most trusted inquisitors, Father Bernard and Father Thomas, to investigate the convent of Saint-Germain-le-Pauvre. These were not gentle men. They were seasoned investigators of heresy and the supernatural, men who saw the devil's work around every corner. Their arrival cast a pall over the already fearful convent. The inquisitors began their work immediately, separating the nuns and interrogating them one by one. They were looking for any sign of heresy, any deviation from orthodox belief, any crack through which evil might have entered. The nuns' terrified testimonies about the split shadow only confirmed the Inquisitor's darkest suspicions. They saw it not as a strange natural anomaly, but as a clear sign of demonic possession or a pact with dark forces. The focus of the investigation, of course, was Sister Amélie. She was isolated, subjected to days of relentless questioning. Father Bernard and Father Thomas probed every aspect of her life, her past, her private prayers, her thoughts. They performed exorcism rites, chanting prayers and splashing her with holy water, hoping to provoke a reaction from the entity they believed was attached to her. But Amélie remained steadfast. She wept, she prayed, she insisted she had no knowledge of why this was happening. She was as terrified as everyone else. The Inquisitors documented everything. They observed the shadow phenomenon themselves, describing in their detailed reports how the second shadow seemed to mock the cross and recoil from holy names, though it is impossible to know if this was objective observation or a projection of their own beliefs. They noted that Amélie herself showed no signs of possession, no speaking in tongues, no unholy strength, yet the shadow persisted, a silent, damning witness against her. After weeks of investigation, the Inquisitors came to a terrifying conclusion. They could not prove that Sister Amélie was a witch, nor could they successfully exorcise the demon they believed was attached to her. The phenomenon was inexplicably tied to her, but it seemed to have a life of its own. They feared that the entity, whatever it was, had tainted the very stones of the convent. It was an infection that could not be cleansed without destroying the host. Their final report to the bishop recommended a drastic and unprecedented solution. They declared that the convent of Saint-Jean-le-Pauvre was a site of an incurable spiritual plague. The evil was too deeply embedded, centered around Amélie but contaminating the entire grounds. Their recommendation was to seal it off from the world, permanently. The bishop accepted their grim verdict. A decree was issued. The convent of Saint-Jean-le-Pauvre was to be deconsecrated and abandoned. The remaining nuns were scattered, sent to other convents across France with strict orders never to speak of what had happened. They were to live out their days in penance for having been exposed to such a powerful evil. And what of Sister Amélie, the nun of the split light? Her fate is the most tragic part of the story. She was not to be transferred. The Inquisitors deemed her the source, the anchor of the phenomenon. To let her leave would be to risk spreading the contagion. So, she was to be left behind, walled up within the convent that had been her only home. A small team of masons was brought in. Under the watchful eyes of the Inquisitors, they bricked up the doors and windows of the main chapel and Amélie's cell, entombing her inside. She was left with a simple cross, a supply of bread and water, and her terrifying, constant companion, the split shadow. For centuries, the story of the nun of the split light faded into local legend, a terrifying bedtime story told to scare children away from the ruins of the old convent. The sealed buildings slowly crumbled, overgrown with ivy and reclaimed by nature. The place was considered cursed, and no one dared to venture near it, especially after dark. But the story doesn't end there. In the late 19th century, with the rise of interest in spiritualism and historical mysteries, a group of paranormal investigators from Paris learned of the legend. Intrigued, they traveled to the site of the forgotten convent. They found the ruins just as the legends described, including the main chapel, its doors and windows still crudely bricked up after more than 400 years. They decided to spend the night, setting up their rudimentary equipment, early cameras, temperature gauges, and audio recording devices. What they experienced that night became a seminal event in early paranormal research. As dusk fell, they reported a dramatic drop in temperature around the sealed chapel. They heard faint sounds from within what they described as soft weeping and the scraping of stone on stone. But the most significant event happened as they lit their lanterns. On the ancient, vine-covered wall of the sealed chapel, a single, distorted shadow appeared. It had no source. No person was standing in the path of the light to cast it. The shadow was that of a slender figure in a nun's habit. And as they watched, transfixed in horror, the shadow split in two. One remained still, while the other began to move, twisting and contorting on the wall, a silent, spectral dance of a soul trapped for centuries. The terrified investigators documented their findings, and their report brought the legend of the Nun of the Split Light back into the public eye. To this day, the ruins of the convent of Saint-Jean-le-Pauvre are a hotspot for paranormal enthusiasts and ghost hunters. Visitors and investigators continue to report strange occurrences. The most common report is, of course, the reappearance of the split shadow on the chapel wall at twilight. People have captured photos and videos of the strange phenomenon, shadowy forms that appear and move with no discernible source. Others report hearing disembodied whispers, the sounds of weeping, and an overwhelming feeling of profound sadness and despair that permeates the area. Is it the lingering spirit of Sister Amelie, forever bound to the place of her horrifying demise? Or is it the dark entity that attached itself to her, still haunting the cursed ground? We may never know the true story behind the Nun of the Split Light. Was it a genuine supernatural event, a case of mass hysteria, or a misunderstood natural phenomenon? Whatever the answer, the tale of Sister Amelie serves as a chilling reminder of how fear and the unknown can lead to tragedy, a story whose shadow still stretches across the centuries. Ancient Egypt believed in many things, but above all, it believed in order. The universe was held together by cosmic balance, truth, and harmony. Every pharaoh was expected to embody it in life and submit to it in death. Judgment was not optional. It was the mechanism that allowed the dead to pass into eternity and ensured the gods themselves remained in balance. Which is why one missing name still disturbs historians. Among Egypt's meticulously recorded dynasties exists a silence so deliberate it feels violent, a reign erased from king lists, a cartouche chiseled smooth wherever it once appeared, a pharaoh whose memory was not simply neglected but hunted down and destroyed. And yet his tomb was never robbed. The power of a name to understand the fear surrounding this forgotten ruler, one must first understand the Egyptian concept of the name. A person existed in several parts, the body, the soul, the spirit, but the name was essential. To erase a name was to annihilate a person completely, denying them existence in both worlds. Enemies were sometimes cursed in death, their names scratched out to weaken them in the afterlife. But this pharaoh suffered something far more extreme. His name was removed from every official record. Later scribes altered king lists to jump directly from his predecessor to his successor, as if no reign had occurred at all. This was not revisionism, it was ritual destruction. A tomb that should not exist when the burial chamber was discovered, expectations were low. Tombs of erased rulers were usually dismantled or looted long ago, but this one was different. Hidden deep beneath layers of stone and sand, the chamber was intact. No broken seals, no scattered treasure, no evidence of grave robbers. The builders had concealed it carefully, not to protect wealth, but to prevent discovery. Inside, the walls were covered in inscriptions, but none followed traditional funerary formulas. There were no declarations of purity, no boasts of good rule, no pleas for favorable judgment. Instead, the text was defensive. Urgent, afraid, prayers of refusal. Most tombs begged the gods for mercy. This one begged them for absence. Rather than inviting Osiris to weigh the heart, the inscriptions asked him to turn away. Anubis was asked not to guide the soul. Thoth was asked not to record his deeds. Even the 42 judges of the dead were named not in supplication but in warning. The message was consistent across the chamber: do not judge him. Judgment, in Egyptian belief, was not merely a trial. It was a transformation. A soul deemed worthy would pass into the field of reeds, continuing existence in eternal order. A soul found wanting would be devoured by Ammit and cease to exist. But these inscriptions imply a third fear, something worse than annihilation. A king who broke Ma'at. Historians have long speculated what crime could justify such an extraordinary response. Political failure alone would not suffice. Even tyrants were judged normally. The tomb suggests something more profound: a ruler who violated the very structure of cosmic order, one whose actions made him incompatible with judgment itself. If his heart were weighed, what would happen? The fear seems to be not that he would fail, but that the process would not contain him. In this interpretation, judgment becomes dangerous. The gods themselves are at risk. The sealing of the dead, unlike traditional royal burials, the sarcophagus was surrounded by additional stone barriers. not protective layers, but isolating ones. The body was placed deeper than usual, encased in materials meant to separate rather than honor. There were no statues to receive offerings. No false doors for the spirit to pass through. The tomb was designed to be complete, closed, and permanent. It was not a gateway, it was a containment. The curse of silence, perhaps the most telling detail, is the absence of curses against tomb robbers. Egyptian tombs often warned intruders of divine punishment. This chamber had none. It did not threaten the living. It warned the dead. The inscriptions repeatedly emphasized stillness, forgetting, non-recognition. The language suggests the builders believed memory itself could activate something. That speaking his name, even in death, might allow him to participate in cosmic processes he should not enter. The successors fear the pharaoh who followed him benefited from his erasure. Stability returned, records resumed. Temples were rebuilt, yet subtle signs of unease linger. Certain rituals were modified. Some funerary texts gained additional protective lines not seen before. Scholars believe these changes were not coincidental, but preventative measures designed to ensure no future ruler could become so dangerous again. The past had taught them something they did not wish to repeat. Why the tomb survived if the pharaoh was so feared? Why not destroy his body entirely? The answer may lie in Egyptian belief itself. To desecrate a royal body was to risk cosmic imbalance. Destruction could release what containment suppressed. Burial, when done correctly, could neutralize without provoking. So they hid him, they erased him, and they left him untouched. Not forgiven. Not punished, simply excluded. Judgment denied in the Egyptian worldview. To be judged was a right. Even the wicked faced the scales. To deny judgment was to place someone outside the system entirely. The pharaoh who refused judgment or was refused by it exists in a liminal state. Neither saved nor destroyed, neither remembered nor gone. A king without eternity. A warning across time. Modern scholars debate whether the fear reflected in the tomb was symbolic, political, or exaggerated by later generations. But the consistency of the evidence suggests genuine dreadnought propaganda. This was not about rewriting history, it was about preventing recurrence. The tomb stands as a warning carved into stone. Some transgressions cannot be weighed, and some individuals must never face the gods not for their sake, but for everyone else's. And so, somewhere beneath the desert, a pharaoh lies untouched, unnamed, and unjudged, waiting in a silence that even the dead were asked to respect. In the dawn of civilization, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers breathed life into the arid lands of Mesopotamia, a unique culture flourished. These were the Marsh Arabs, the Maiden, people who built their entire world upon the shimmering waters and swaying reeds. Their homes, their boats, their very lives were woven from the bounty of the wetlands. But within this cradle of life, a shadow lurked, a story whispered from one generation to the next, a tale of a creature born from the marsh itself. They called it the Reed Man. Imagine you're poling a masshoof, a long, slender canoe, through the labyrinthine waterways. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying vegetation. Reeds, taller than a man, tower on either side, their feathery tops rustling in the breeze. The sun beats down, but the water provides a deceptive coolness. It's a world of vibrant life. Fish dart beneath the surface, birds call from hidden nests. But as twilight begins to bleed across the sky, painting it in hues of orange and purple, a different feeling settles in. The familiar sounds of the marsh seem to quiet, replaced by an unnerving silence. It's in this moment that you might see him. At first, you wouldn't even be sure what you're looking at. It appears as just another clump of reeds, perhaps a bit thicker, a bit taller than the rest. It stands impossibly still, a dark, humanoid silhouette against the fading light. It's woven, they said, from the toughest reeds and bound with the dark, sticky mud from the riverbed. It has no face, no features, just a vaguely defined head and long, spindly limbs that mimic the reeds surrounding it. It is a masterpiece of natural camouflage, a perfect predator for an environment where everything is either hidden or exposed. The legends say the Reed Man could stand motionless for days, even weeks, a silent, patient sentinel of the marsh. It would wait, unblinking, for the unsuspecting. A lone fisherman checking his nets, a family traveling between floating villages, or perhaps a curious child who had strayed too far from the safety of their mud heath, their large, arched reed house. The creature was part of the landscape, as natural as the water and the sky, until you got too close. That's when the true horror would begin. As a traveler drew near, the figure would move. Not with a sudden lunge, but with a slow, deliberate creak, like old, wet wood bending under pressure. It would lean forward, its reedy torso seeming to unlatch, to unfold. The stories describe a hollow cavity within its chest, a dark, gaping void. And from this void would pour not blood or organs, but a living, buzzing, crawling torrent. A dense black cloud of insects biting flies, swamp mosquitoes, and other nameless crawling things that fester in the stagnant waters. The cloud would swarm the unfortunate victim, a suffocating, stinging mass. Their screams would be swallowed by the rustling reeds and the drone of a million tiny wings. The attack was not just physical, it was a psychological assault. To be consumed by the smallest, most detestable creatures of the marsh, unleashed from a monster made of the very material that gave you life, it was a fate worse than being taken by a crocodile or a wild boar. It was a violation of the natural order, a perversion of the world they knew. This fear was so profound, so deeply ingrained in the psyche of the marsh dwellers, that the mere sighting of a reed man was enough to cause mass panic. Entire villages, painstakingly constructed and maintained for generations, would be abandoned overnight. Imagine the scene that would greet a visitor the next day, a ghost village floating on the water. The fires in the hearths would be cold, but with food still sitting in the pots, half-eaten meals left on woven mats. Tools would be dropped where they were last used. Personal belongings, precious and few, left behind. It was as if every single inhabitant, men, women, and children had simply stood up in unison, walked to the edge of their man-made island, and stepped into the dark water, never to be seen again. Archaeologists and historians exploring the remnants of these ancient settlements have been baffled by this phenomenon. They've unearthed sites that are perfectly preserved, frozen in a moment of sudden departure. There are no signs of a struggle, no evidence of an attack, no indication of plague or famine, just absence. A void where a community once thrived. The official explanations often point to sudden floods or intertribal conflicts, but the folklore of the region offers a more chilling alternative. They didn't flee from a tangible threat. They fled from a specter, a supernatural dread that unraveled the fabric of their society. They walked into the water not to drown, but to escape, to return to the primeval element from which the monster came, hoping to find peace in its depths. What was the Reed Man? Was it a literal monster, a cryptid of the ancient world? Or was it something more? Some scholars suggest it might have been a symbolic representation of the dangers of the marsh itself. The diseases carried by insects, the sudden, disorienting fevers, malaria, perhaps could have been personified as this terrifying figure. An outbreak could easily feel like an attack from a single, malevolent entity, causing hallucinations and delirium that would drive people to abandon their homes in a state of panic. A man, delirious with fever, stumbling out of the reeds covered in insects, might have been the seed of the legend. Others propose a more human explanation. Could the Reed Man have been a tactic used in warfare between rival tribes? Imagine a warrior, camouflaged in reeds and mud, using a hollowed-out gourd filled with biting insects as a primitive biological weapon. The sheer terror and confusion such an attack would cause could be enough to rout an entire village without a single sword being drawn. It would be a ghost story weaponized, a myth made real to sow chaos. But the old tales don't speak of men in costumes. They speak of a creature that was not born, but woven. A thing that was part of the marsh, its protector, and its executioner. It was the embodiment of the swamp's darker side, the decay, the disease, the suffocating stillness that could swallow a man whole. In a world where the boundary between the natural and the supernatural was thin, the Reed Man was a stark reminder that the very environment that sustained them could also turn against them in the most horrifying way imaginable. Today, the great marshes of Iraq are much smaller than they were in ancient times. Drained for agriculture and scarred by conflict, Much of the traditional Dan way of life has vanished, and with it many of the old stories. But somewhere in the remaining wetlands, in the quiet, forgotten waterways where the reeds grow thick and tall, the legend persists. And if you listen closely on a still evening, you might just hear a faint, creaking sound like wet reeds bending slowly in the dark. A reminder of the silent, waiting figure of the marsh and the villages that simply vanished into the water. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the dark folklore of ancient Mesopotamia. If you enjoy exploring the strange and forgotten corners of history and myth, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments what ancient legend you think we should investigate next. Stay curious, and we'll see you in the next one. Have you ever heard of the River Widow of the Danube? It's a chilling tale, one whispered by locals for generations, a story that blurs the line between folklore and grim reality. It all begins with a series of unsettling discoveries along the banks of the mighty Danube River. Archaeologists and amateur explorers have, over the years, unearthed human skeletons near the river's edge, sometimes in areas that haven't seen water for decades. The strange part? These skeletons often show telltale signs of drowning. The hyoid bone in the neck is fractured in a way consistent with asphyxiation by water, and the lungs, even in skeletal remains, show evidence of diatom algae, the kind you'd only find deep within the river. Yet there's no water damage to the surrounding soil, no sign of a flood or a shifting river course that could explain how these individuals drowned on what appears to be solid, dry land. This mystery is where the legend begins. Old stories speak of a spectral figure, a woman-shaped creature that emerges only when the Danube's water levels are at their lowest. They say she appears ethereal, almost made of mist and river fog, her form shimmering in the twilight. She walks the exposed, cracked riverbeds, areas that are usually submerged deep beneath the current. Fishermen and late-night travelers have reported seeing her from a distance, a lonely silhouette against the setting sun or rising moon. They call her the River Widow, forever searching for something she lost to the water. But this is no passive ghost. The legend warns that the River Widow is a predator. She doesn't chase or attack in the traditional sense. Instead, she calls out to lone wanderers. Imagine you're walking along the dry bank, enjoying the quiet of the evening. Suddenly, you hear a voice, a soft, sorrowful whisper on the wind. It's a voice that sounds impossibly familiar, and it's calling your name. Not a generic cry for help, but your specific name spoken with an intimacy that sends a shiver down your spine. It sounds like a loved one, a friend you haven't seen in years, or maybe even the voice of someone you've lost. Curiosity, concern, or a deep, unexplainable pull draws you towards the sound. You see her then, a distant figure beckoning you to come closer? You leave the solid path and step onto the dry, cracked mud of the riverbed. The ground feels firm under your feet. It's just dried earth, right? You take another step, and another, your eyes fixed on the mysterious woman who seems to glide effortlessly over the terrain. She keeps a steady distance, always just a little further ahead, luring you deeper into the heart of the exposed river basin. Here's where the true horror of the legend unfolds. As you follow her, a strange transformation begins beneath your feet. The solid ground, which felt so firm just moments ago, starts to soften. It's a subtle change at first, like walking on wet sand, but with each step, it gets worse. The cracked mud turns to thick, cloying sludge, and soon, it feels as though you are wading through water. But there is no water. The air is dry, the ground ahead of you still looks solid, yet you're sinking. It's as if the riverbed itself has remembered its true nature, reverting to a liquid state only under your feet. Panic sets in. You try to turn back, but the suction is immense. The ground you just crossed, which was firm moments ago, is now a treacherous, invisible quagmire. The more you struggle, the faster you sink. It's a terrifying, paradoxical drowning. You're not in water, but you are being swallowed by the river itself, pulled down into the earth as if it were a bottomless pool. Your lungs fill not with water, but with a mixture of mud, silt, and supernatural dread. And all the while, the River Widow watches, her silent vigil unbroken, before she fades back into the mist, leaving you to become another one of the river's skeletal secrets. This legend serves as a powerful cautionary tale for those who live along the Danube. It's a reminder that the river is a living, breathing entity with a memory and a power that extends beyond its visible waters. The dry riverbed is not dead land. It's merely sleeping water. The story is told to children to keep them away from the dangerous, unpredictable mudflats that can form during low tides, which can be genuinely hazardous. But for others, the story is more than just a fable. It's an explanation for the unexplainable skeletons, a name for the chilling feeling of being watched when you reel alone by the water's edge. Modern science might offer explanations involving pockets of liquefied soil or unusual geological phenomena. They might theorize that flash floods could have occurred, leaving bodies in strange places. But these explanations never quite capture the chilling consistency of the discoveries or the personal, intimate nature of the legend, the fact that she calls you by your name. How could a natural phenomenon know your name? How could it mimic the voice of someone you trust? That's the part that science can't explain away, the detail that keeps the legend alive in the hearts and minds of the people of the Danube. So, if you ever find yourself walking along the Danube during a dry spell and you see a lonely figure on the riverbed, or if you hear a familiar voice calling your name from the misty flats, remember the legend of the River Widow. Don't let curiosity be your downfall. Stay on the solid ground, turn away from the beckoning mirage, and walk away. Because she is still waiting, patient as the tide itself, for her next companion to join the river's silent, skeletal collection. She waits for the day the water recedes so she can walk the dry earth once more, searching and calling for you. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into dark folklore, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next story. See you next time. Throughout history, people have tried to give shape to injustice. When laws fail, when violence goes unanswered, when the innocent die without witness or trial, cultures often turn to symbols, omens that suggest the world itself has noticed what humanity chose to ignore. Among the most unsettling of these symbols is a flower known only from fragmented records and whispered tradition, the rose of the reaper. It is not a rose in the botanical sense, nor is it associated with beauty or fragrance. It is a marker, a signal, a quiet accusation growing from the soil itself. According to legend, the rose of the reaper blooms only where death was wrong, where lives were taken unjustly, secretly, or without mercy. And unlike other symbols of mourning, this one could not be harvested, owned, or studied without consequence. First mentions in the margins, the earliest references to the rose appear not in official texts, but in margin scribbled notes beside prayers, trial records, and monastery ledgers. Medieval monks did not devote full passages to the flower. Instead, they warned of it in cramped handwriting, as though reluctant to draw attention. "Do not touch the pale thorn," one note reads. "Where it grows, judgment has not been given." These warnings appear beside accounts of executions later deemed unlawful, mass graves following purges, and unrecorded burials along forgotten roads. The flower was never described as a miracle or a blessing. It was an indictment. The rose did not prevent death. It remembered it. A plant without a pattern. Descriptions of the rose of the reaper are remarkably consistent across regions and centuries. It is said to have pale or ashen petals, sometimes tinged with gray or bone white. The stem is thin but covered in unusually sharp thorns. The leaves appear dry even when freshly grown, as if drained of vitality. Most disturbing is the sap. When the stem or petals are damaged, the rose bleeds not clear resin, but a thick red fluid. Witnesses described it as slow-moving, dark, and staining, leaving marks on skin that lingered far longer than plant matter should. Some claim the sap was warm. Others swore it pulsed briefly before stilling. Places where it appeared the rose was never found in meadows or forests by chance. It appeared in specific locations. Execution sites later ruled unlawful, crossroads where travelers were murdered and buried anonymously, fields where entire villages were quietly erased during political upheaval. In one documented case from the late 1500s, a rose was reported growing directly from the crack of a gallows platform dismantled decades earlier. In another, a cluster appeared on land newly plowed for farming, revealing bones beneath the soil shortly afterward. The flower did not grow where death was common. It grew where death was wrong. This distinction mattered deeply to those who feared it. Early attempts at study by the early modern period, natural philosophers began collecting plant specimens with increasing confidence. Curiosity slowly overcame superstition, and the rose of the reaper became a target of study. The results were consistent and alarming. Cuttings withered within hours. Roots removed from the soil decayed unnaturally fast, collapsing into blackened pulp. Seeds, when planted elsewhere, never sprouted. Even sketches of the flower were sometimes destroyed by the artists themselves, who claimed unease while drawing it. One physician wrote that the plant resisted possession as though it belonged only to the place it grew. Still, one specimen survived. The one that did not die in the early 19th century, a botanist skeptical, methodical, and dismissive of folklore successfully transported a living, rose specimen from an abandoned execution ground to a controlled environment. Unlike all others, this one did not immediately wither. It remained upright, its petals did not fall. Its color did not fade. When examined, the stem was nicked accidentally by a metal tool. The sap emerged slowly, thicker than expected, red, heavy. Chemical analysis at the time was limited, but notes describe iron content inconsistent with plant resin. Most unsettling was the reaction of the specimen itself. Witnesses claimed the sap flow increased after the initial cut, not from pressure, but in response continuing until the tool was withdrawn. The plant did not die from the wound, it stabilized. This was the only rose known to survive removal from its place of origin. An object of unease, the specimen was stored, not displayed. Researchers avoided prolonged contact. One assistant requested reassignment, citing recurring dreams of suffocation and falling. Another claimed the room felt crowded despite being empty. These accounts were dismissed as suggestion. But the notes grow shorter over time. Entries become infrequent. Eventually, documentation stops altogether. The specimen was later recorded as lost during a containment failure. No further details were given. No other roses have since been successfully studied. Folklore versus biology. Modern botanists argue that the rose of the reaper could be a rare mutation, perhaps a plant reacting uniquely to mineral-rich soil, contaminated by blood, ash, or decomposition. Others point to fungal symbiosis or iron-absorbing species misidentified through fear. These explanations address the plant's appearance, but not its behavior. Why did it grow only in sites of unjust death? Why did it resist transplantation? Why did it bleed? Plants respond to environment, but they do not discriminate moral context. And yet, the rose appears to have done exactly that, appearing not where death occurred, but where it violated something deeper. A living accusation in many traditions, the dead require witnesses. Without acknowledgement, injustice lingers. The rose of the reaper fits this psychological need too precisely to dismiss. It marked places where courts failed, where records were altered, where truth was buried. The flower did not call for vengeance. It did not curse the living. It simply grew quietly where silence had been imposed, as if to say, this happened. Why it withered, the inability to cultivate the rose elsewhere, may not be accidental. Folklore insists the flower feeds on unresolved injustice. Remove it from that context, and it starves. The one surviving specimen challenges this idea, but perhaps it survived not because it could live anywhere, but because the injustice it marked had never been resolved. If so, the rose did not need the soil, it carried the memory with it. No new sightings in the modern era, no verified sightings of the rose of the reaper have been recorded. This absence invites uncomfortable interpretations. Has justice improved? Or has the world simply become better at hiding its wrongs? Mass graves are paved over, records are sealed. Death is bureaucratized, sanitized. Perhaps the rose no longer has room to grow. Or perhaps it still does and no one is looking closely enough. A flower that should not be touched, the rose of the reaper, was never meant to be understood, catalogued, or owned. It was not medicine, not poison, not ornament. It was evidence. A reminder that the earth keeps accounts even when humans do not. That some wrongs leave marks deeper than bones, and that attempts to study or remove those marks may fail not because they are supernatural, but because they were never meant to leave. If the rose bled, perhaps it did so, not because it was alive, but because something beneath it still was. And perhaps the reason it no longer appears is not that injustice has ended, but that the ground has grown tired of speaking. Have you ever heard the desert sing? I'm not talking about the howl of the wind or the rustle of sand. I mean a real, human-like song rising from the dunes themselves. For centuries, travelers in the vast expanse of the Sahara have returned with chilling tales. Stories of haunting melodies that seem to have no source, echoing across the endless sea of sand, especially as dusk falls. Most people dismiss these as hallucinations, tricks of the mind caused by heat and exhaustion. But what if they weren't? What if something was actually singing out there? This is where the story takes a truly unsettling turn. Recent archaeological expeditions, drawn by these persistent legends, began to investigate specific areas where the singing was most frequently reported. They weren't looking for treasure or ancient cities. They were looking for a sound. As they dug deep beneath the shifting dunes, they found something that defied all explanation. It wasn't pottery, it wasn't tools. It was human remains, but like none they had ever seen before. Skeletons, perfectly preserved by the arid climate, were found in strange, vertical positions. And the most terrifying detail? Every single skull had its mouth fossilized wide open, as if frozen mid-scream or mid-song. The discovery sent shockwaves through the scientific community. How did these people get here? Why were they all buried this way, with their mouths agape? The local legends, once dismissed as folklore, suddenly seemed terrifyingly plausible. The old stories claim that the desert is not a dead place. It's a living, breathing entity, and it learned how to sing in the most brutal way imaginable. The legends speak of ancient rituals, of people being buried alive as sacrifices to the desert gods. As they struggled for their last breath, their final cries and songs were absorbed by the very sand that consumed them. The desert, the stories say, learned their melodies, memorized their voices, and now it sings their songs back to the world. This horrifying choir isn't just a single, monotonous sound. Witnesses and researchers claim the songs change. They shift with the direction and intensity of the wind. A gentle breeze might carry a soft, melancholic lullaby across the dunes. But when a fierce sandstorm rages, the sound transforms into a powerful, tormented chorus, a symphony of anguish and despair. It's as if the wind is the conductor of this ghostly orchestra, playing upon the fossilized remains buried deep within the earth. Each grain of sand that brushes past these open mouths is said to carry a note, a fragment of a long-lost voice. Scientists have tried to offer rational explanations. They talk about singing sands or booming dunes, a known natural phenomenon where sand grains of a certain size and shape create sound as they slide down a dune's face. They propose that the unique geological composition of this specific region, combined with the shape of the underground rock formations, could amplify these sounds, creating an acoustic illusion that mimics human voices, the open-mouthed skeletons. Perhaps a specific burial ritual of an unknown tribe, their jaws simply relaxing and falling open after death before fossilization. It's a neat, logical theory, it makes sense. But it does and quite explain the sheer complexity and emotional depth of the melodies that people have reported. Could simple friction and acoustics really replicate the sound of a lament, a hymn, a cry for help? The people who have heard it, who have stood alone in the twilight as a chorus rises from the ground beneath their feet, they say no. They describe a quality to the music that feels undeniably human, filled with a sorrow that science can't measure. They speak of hearing distinct harmonies, even what sounds like words in forgotten languages, carried on the wind. It's a phenomenon that straddles the line between geology and ghost story, between the known world and the terrifyingly unknown. The area has now been nicknamed the Choir of the Sahara. It's a place of pilgrimage for the curious, the brave, and the paranormal investigators. They come with sophisticated recording equipment, hoping to capture definitive proof of the singing sands. The recordings they've brought back are chilling. When you filter out the sound of the wind, a faint rhythmic humming remains. Sometimes it's a low drone, other times it has a series of rising and falling tones that sound eerily like a human choir warming up. Skeptics argue it's just patterns in the noise, our brains trying to make sense of randomness. But for believers, it's the voices of the damned forever trapped in the sand. Imagine standing there as the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The world goes silent for a moment, and then it begins. A low hum that seems to vibrate up from the solace of your feet. It grows, splitting into different tones, weaving a complex, heartbreaking melody that fills the air. You look around, but there's no one. Just you, the endless dunes, and the ghosts of the sand. Would you believe it was just the wind? Or would you believe that the desert remembers and it has a story to tell, a song to sing passed down from those it consumed long ago? The sand choir of the Sahara remains one of the world's most haunting mysteries, a chilling reminder that there are some sounds and some stories that may never be fully explained. What do you think is really happening out there? Is it a freak of nature, a geological anomaly that tricks our ears? Or is it something more? The echo of a forgotten tragedy, eternally sung by the desert itself? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoy exploring the strange and unexplained, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more journeys into the unknown. Stay curious. In the ancient lands of Nubia, etched into stone for millennia, are carvings that tell a chilling story. They depict a lion unlike any other, a creature born from the twilight itself. This wasn't a beast of flesh and blood, but something far older, far more mysterious. The carvings show a powerful feline form, but where its eyes should be, there is nothing but a dark, empty void. Its face is a featureless abyss. The local legends call it the Shadow Lion. This creature, they say, never walked in the bright light of day or the deep dark of night. It belonged to the in-between. The fleeting moments of dusk when the sun dips below the horizon and the world is painted in shades of orange and purple. As it padded silently across the savannah, its body cast shadows, but these shadows had a life of their own. They danced and writhed, stretching and contracting in ways that defied the setting sun, moving independently of the beast that cast them. Imagine seeing that a lion whose shadow is not one, but many, each a wriggling separate entity. It's a sight that would freeze the blood in your veins. The legends are filled with cautionary tales of brave and perhaps foolish hunters. Drawn by the mystery of the creature, they would track it as it emerged at dusk. They followed the lion with its swirling, living shadows, convinced they were on the verge of a legendary prize. But none who followed the shadow lion ever returned the same. They would stumble back into their villages days later, not physically harmed, but fundamentally broken. Their eyes would be wide with an unspeakable terror, their mouths agape as if to scream, but no sound would ever come out. Only warm, silent breath. They were rendered mute, their voices stolen by whatever they witnessed in the twilight expanse. What did they see? What horror was so profound it could literally silence a person forever? The elders believed the lion didn't attack them physically. It showed them something. Something from within that void of a face. Over time, the people of Nubia learned to fear the dusk. They learned the creature's weakness, or rather, its aversion. It wasn't the heat of a flame or the threat of being burned that it feared. It was the light itself. Specifically, the people discovered that if they kept their fires burning brightly throughout the entire night, from the moment the sun began to set until it rose again, the shadow lion would not appear. It wasn't about pain. It was about recognition. The light, they whispered, would give its face form. It would fill the void. And the one thing the shadow lion feared more than anything was being seen, truly seen for what it was. The darkness was its mask, the twilight its domain. In the unwavering light of a fire, it had nowhere to hide. So, what was this creature? Was it a demon, a spirit of the land, or something else entirely? The rock carvings offer no answers, only more questions. The artists who chiseled its form into stone clearly wanted to preserve its memory, to warn future generations. The eyeless face, the living shadows, these weren't just artistic flourishes. They were attempts to capture the essence of a being that defied natural law. Modern interpretations vary. Some folklorists believe the shadow lion was a metaphor for a primal fear, the fear of the unknown, the fear of what lurks just beyond our perception. The hunters who returned mute weren't silenced by a monster, but by a truth so overwhelming that human language couldn't contain it. Others suggest a more supernatural origin. Perhaps the lion was a guardian, a gatekeeper between our world and another. The void on its face could have been a portal, a window into a reality that would shatter the human mind. By looking into it, the hunters saw everything or nothing, and the experience stripped them of their ability to communicate, leaving them as empty vessels. The moving shadows could have been glimpses of that other reality leaking into our own. This theory paints the lion not as a malevolent entity, but as a neutral force of nature whose very existence was dangerous to mortals. It didn't hunt people. People hunted it, and they paid the price for their hubris. Think about the psychology of it. The fear isn't of being eaten by a lion. It's the fear of being unmade by one. The loss of voice is symbolic. Our voice is our identity, our way of expressing who we are. To have it taken away is to have your essence stolen. The hunters returned as living ghosts, their stories locked forever behind silent lips. Their terror served as a more potent warning than any tale could. You didn't need to hear what they saw. You just needed to see them. The tradition of keeping the fires lit through the night became a sacred ritual, a pact between the people and the encroaching darkness. It was a communal act of defiance, a wall of light against the formless terror of the dusk. The fires represented knowledge, consciousness, and community, everything the Shadow Lion, with its void-like existence, was not. As generations passed and the rituals held strong, sightings of the Shadow Lion became less and less frequent, until it vanished completely, receding back into the legends and the ancient rock on which it was carved. But the story serves as a powerful reminder. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved. Some shadows are best left unexplored. The Shadow Lion of Nubia may be gone, but the twilight it roamed is still with us every single day. And in those fleeting moments between light and dark, it's easy to imagine a silent, powerful form padding just at the edge of your vision, its face an empty void, and its shadows dancing with a life of their own. The question remains, if you saw it, would you be brave enough to look away? Or would you follow it into the growing darkness and risk losing your voice forever? Thanks for joining me on this journey into one of history's most fascinating and unsettling legends. If you enjoy diving into mysteries like this, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let me know in the comments what you think the Shadow Lion truly was. Until next time, stay curious. Have you ever wondered what makes you do? Is it your name? Your face? Or is it something deeper, something held within the vast library of your memories? Your first love? The taste of your favorite childhood meal? The sound of your mother's laughter? What if all of that could be stolen in an instant, leaving you a hollow shell, a stranger to yourself? In the rugged, ancient mountains of the Caucasus, a place steeped in myth and folklore, whispers tell of such a thief. A creature that doesn't steal your possessions or your life, but something far more precious, your very identity. They call it the Skin Reader. This isn't your typical monster from a storybook. It doesn't have fangs or claws designed for tearing flesh. Its methods are far more subtle, more intimate, and infinitely more terrifying. The legend says this being possessed a unique and horrifying ability. It learned people not by sight or sound, but through touch. Imagine it, a silent figure emerging from the mountain mists, its fingers unnaturally long and sensitive. It wouldn't harm you in the way you'd expect. Instead, it would simply run those fingers along your skin, tracing the lines of your life. With every gentle caress, it wasn't just feeling the texture of your skin. It was reading it like a book. Every scar, every freckle, every laugh line was a word, a sentence, a chapter in the story of you. It would feel the phantom warmth of a lover's embrace, the sting of a childhood scrape on your knee, the nervous sweat on your palms from your first day at a new job. It absorbed everything. The triumphs, the heartbreaks, the quiet moments of joy, the deep-seated fears you've never spoken aloud. Your entire existence, all the experiences that have shaped you, flowed from your body into its own, as if siphoning your soul through your pores. The morning after an encounter, a village would awaken to a strange and unsettling scene. A person, perhaps a friend or a family member, would be found sitting upright, their eyes wide and vacant. They were physically unharmed, not a scratch on them. They were breathing, their heart was beating, but they were empty, gone. If you called their name, they wouldn't turn. If you showed them a picture of their own children, They would stare at it with the blank curiosity of a stranger. They had no memory of their past, no concept of their present, and no hope for a future. They were a blank slate, a living ghost, their life story erased completely. The skin that once held a universe of experiences was now just a container. The terror that gripped these mountain communities was profound. How do you fight an enemy that doesn't kill you but erases you? How do you protect yourself from a touch that feels like a whisper but steals your world? Fear is a powerful motivator, and desperation is the mother of invention. The elders and shamans gathered, pooling their ancient knowledge, searching for a defense against this memory thief. They reasoned that if the creature reads the skin like a smooth, clear page, then the solution was to corrupt the text, to make the story unreadable. And so, a new tradition was born, one of pain and preservation. This was the beginning of complex scarification rituals. People began to deliberately mark their bodies, not for beauty or status in the traditional sense, but for survival. Intricate patterns were carved into the skin with sharpened stones and heated blades. These weren't random cuts. They were a form of spiritual armor. Each new scar was a disruption, a piece of static in the narrative of their lives. A straight line might be carved to obscure the memory of a straight path taken. A spiral might be etched over the heart to confuse the memory of a circling love or sorrow. The process was agonizing. Communities would gather as individuals underwent the ritual. The sharp sting of the blade was a conscious act of defiance. The searing pain was a shield. They were overwriting their own stories with a new, unreadable language of scars. They were turning their bodies into scrambled manuscripts, filled with false turns, dead ends, and contradictory passages. A scar from a fall as a child would be crisscrossed with a ritual burn, confusing the origin and the emotion tied to it. The smooth skin of a young lover, which might tell a tale of romance, would be deliberately marred to hide that vulnerability. It became a rite of passage. Children, upon reaching a certain age, would receive their first protective marks. Each significant life event, a marriage, the birth of a child, the death of a loved one, was no longer just remembered in the heart, but also recorded and obscured on the skin. A body became a tapestry of defiance, a living testament to the will to remain whole. The more scars a person had, the safer they were considered. A person with smooth, unmarked skin was seen as vulnerable, an open book for the creature to read at its leisure. And according to the legends, it worked. The skin reader, upon touching these newly marked individuals, would become confused. It would trace a line, expecting to read a clear memory of youthful joy, but instead it would encounter a deliberately placed scar that told a conflicting story of pain. It would try to decipher a life's journey, only to find a labyrinth of intersecting lines leading nowhere. The pure, clean data it sought was now corrupted, noisy, and incomprehensible. The creature, unable to feed on these jumbled narratives, began to retreat. Encounters became rarer, and the plague of empty, soulless bodies began to fade from the villages. The practice of ritual scarification continued for generations, long after the immediate threat had passed. It became woven into the very fabric of the culture. The scars were no longer just a defense mechanism. They were a badge of honor. They told the story of their ancestors' struggle and their victory over the intangible thief. They were a permanent reminder that their identity, their very soul, was worth fighting for, worth enduring pain for. The markings became a symbol of belonging, of community, and of the fierce resilience of the human spirit. This story, whether it's literal truth or a powerful allegory, resonates deeply. It speaks to our fundamental fear of losing ourselves. We spend our lives building our identity, brick by brick, with every experience we have. The thought of that being wiped away is a terror that transcends any physical threat. The legend of the skin reader of the Caucasus is a chilling exploration of this fear. It suggests that our stories, the ones written on our hearts and minds, are our most valuable possession. And it poses a fascinating question. If faced with a similar threat, how far would you go to protect your memories? Would you be willing to scar your own skin, to endure physical pain, to make your life story unreadable to save it from being stolen? It's a dark and powerful thought. The tale serves as a stark reminder to cherish your experiences, to hold on to your memories, and to be the sole author and guardian of your own story. Because in the end, without our stories, what are we? Thank you for joining me on this journey into the mountains of folklore. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more dives into the world's most mysterious legends. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Until next time, stay curious. Have you ever stood before a truly ancient monument and felt a sense of wrongness? A feeling that goes beyond simple awe or historical curiosity? Today, we're journeying to the Salisbury Plain in England, to a place that has captivated and baffled humanity for millennia, Stonehenge. But we're not here to talk about druids, solar alignments, or the mysteries of its construction. We're here to talk about what might be sleeping beneath it. Most theories about Stonehenge focus on what it was built for. A temple, an astronomical observatory, a burial ground? But what if all those theories are wrong? What if its purpose wasn't to build something up, but to hold something down? Let's start with the whispers, the stories that predate even our earliest written records. The folklore of the region is filled with unsettling tales, not just of spirits or fairies, but of the land itself. Ancient accounts, passed down through generations, speak of a deliberate burial, something immense and powerful interred beneath the earth long before the first sarsen stone was ever raised. Imagine the people who lived there thousands of years ago. They didn't write things down, but they talked. They told stories around the fire. And many of those stories revolved around a disturbing phenomenon, unsettling, vivid dreams. People across the region complained of shared nightmares where the very ground seemed to breathe. A slow, rhythmic rising and falling, like the chest of a colossal, sleeping creature. They felt it in their bones, a deep, resonant pulse that troubled their sleep and haunted their waking hours. This wasn't just a story. It was a communal experience, a shared terror that permeated their culture. So, what do you do when the ground you live on feels alive and menacing? You don't build a temple to worship it, you build a prison to contain it. This is where our perspective on Stonehenge flips entirely. Look at the monument again, not as a place of gathering, but as a cage. The massive sarsen stones, weighing up to 40 tons each, aren't just pillars, they're bars. The intricate lintels locking them together aren't for architectural beauty, they're shackles. The concentric circles aren't pathways for procession. They're layers of containment, a complex lock designed to keep something in. Think about the sheer effort involved. Transporting these stones over vast distances, shaping them with primitive tools, and erecting them with breathtaking precision. This wasn't a project undertaken lightly. It speaks of a desperate, urgent need. A fear so profound that it motivated generations to pour their entire existence into constructing this colossal seal. They weren't building a calendar to mark the seasons. They were building a ward to prevent an awakening. The arrangement of the stones, often linked to celestial events, might not have been to summon power from the stars, but to channel it, to use cosmic energies as an extra layer of reinforcement for the prison below. Fast forward to the modern era. We have science, technology, instruments that can see and hear things our ancestors could only feel. And what do they find at Stonehenge? Anomalies, lots of them. Geologists and archaeologists have been scanning the ground beneath the stones for decades. They found strange magnetic variations and unexplained voids in the earth. But the most chilling discovery comes from seismographs, the instruments we use to detect earthquakes. Even today, highly sensitive devices placed around the monument record faint rhythmic vibrations. A deep, low-frequency hum. Scientists have tried to explain it. They've looked for traffic on distant roads, military exercises, natural geological tremors, but they found no conventional source. The vibrations seem to emanate from directly beneath the stones themselves. A steady, rhythmic pulse, just like in the old stories. A pulse like a slow, steady heartbeat. Or the deep, even breathing of something vast and ancient and asleep. This reframes every strange occurrence at the site. The reports of malfunctioning electronic equipment, the disorientation some visitors feel, the eerie silence that can suddenly fall over the plain. Are these just quirks of the landscape, or are they symptoms of an immense dormant power leaking from its cage? A power that strains against its bonds with every slow breath. The original wooden structures that predated the stones could have been the first frantic attempts to pin this entity down. When wood proved insufficient, they turned to earthworks, digging ditches and mounds. And when that wasn't enough, they embarked on the monumental task of raising the stone circle itself, a final, desperate act of engineering born from primal fear. Each phase of construction was an escalation, a response to the growing strength of the sleeper beneath. So what is it? We can only speculate. An ancient terrestrial entity? Something that fell from the stars and was buried by the terrified witnesses? A creature of such immense psychic power that its very dreams could infect the minds of those living nearby? The legends don't give it a name. It is simply the thing in the ground, the breathing earth, a nameless dread. The purpose of Stonehenge then was not to mark time but to stop it, to ensure that the creature beneath never woke up, that its cycle of sleep would be eternal. The builders are long gone. Their knowledge, their rituals, their warnings are lost to us, faded into myth and folklore. All that remains is their final, silent testament in stone. A prison, and the prisoner is still there, waiting. It's slow, stony dreams vibrating through the earth, a constant reminder of what lies just beneath our feet. We visit as tourists, we take pictures, we marvel at the mystery. But perhaps we should be treading more carefully, because we don't know how strong the bars of this ancient cage still are. And we don't know what might happen if the sleeper beneath Stonehenge finally begins to stir. Next time you see an image of those iconic stones, don't think of it as a place of worship. Think of it as a warning sign. The largest, and perhaps the oldest, do not disturb sign in human history. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the shadows of history. If you enjoyed this different take on an ancient mystery, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the unknown. See you next time. Have you ever wondered what truly happens in the aftermath of a great catastrophe? We often hear about the destruction, the loss, and the rebuilding. But what about the stories that whisper through the ashes? The ones that are too strange, too terrifying to be easily dismissed or explained? Today, we journey back in time to the ancient Indus Valley, to a city scorched by an inferno so immense it reshaped not just the landscape, but the very soul of its people. This is the story of the smoke serpent. Imagine a bustling metropolis, one of the cradles of civilization, suddenly engulfed in flames. The fire wasn't a small incident. It was a conflagration that devoured entire districts, turning thriving streets into channels of molten destruction. It burned for days, a relentless beast of heat and light. And when the last ember finally died, a blanket of thick, acrid smoke hung heavy over the ruins, a shroud for a city in mourning. It was within this choking haze that the real horror began. Survivors, huddled in the few untouched corners of the city, started to whisper. They spoke of something unnatural moving through the smoke-filled streets. It wasn't a person, nor was it an animal. It was a serpent, but this was no creature of flesh and blood. It was made entirely of smoke, a sinuous, coiling entity that moved with a terrifying, silent grace. It was darker than the surrounding smog, a shifting silhouette of pure soot and ash. They said it had no eyes, yet it seemed to see. It had no physical form, yet it possessed a terrifying purpose. Witnesses watched in horror from their hiding places as this smoke wraith slithered through the devastated city. It didn't batter down doors or shatter windows. Instead, it would glide towards a home, its form becoming thin and ethereal, seeping through the cracks around a doorway, under the lintel, or even through the porous clay of the walls themselves. It entered not homes, but lungs. The accounts are chillingly consistent. The serpent would flow towards a person, its smoky tendrils reaching out. Before the victim could even scream, the serpent would surge forward, entering their mouth and nose, a torrent of suffocating ash pouring into their body. The person would collapse, their struggle brief and silent, their body convulsing as if drowning on dry land. The serpent would then withdraw, its form recoalescing from the victim's last breath, and continue its silent, deadly patrol. When the smoke finally cleared enough for people to venture out, the true nightmare was revealed. Bodies were found everywhere in homes, in alleyways, seemingly untouched. There were no marks of violence, no burns on their skin, no signs of a struggle. They looked as if they had simply laid down and died. But the few who dared to perform last rites discovered the ghastly truth. Internally, the victims were ravaged. Their lungs were blackened, filled with a dense packed soot, as if a furnace had been ignited within their chests. From the outside, they were pristine. On the inside, they were charcoal. This wasn't just a story told by a few hysterical survivors. It was a shared trauma, a collective memory seared into the city's consciousness. The sheer number of victims found in this bizarre state defied any logical explanation. How could so many people, untouched by the flames that had raged around them, die in such a specific, horrifying way? The physicians of the time had no answers. The priests had only fear. The phenomenon was given a name, the smoke serpent. It was the vengeful spirit of the Great Fire, a manifestation of the city's collective suffocation and despair. The psychological impact was profound and lasting. Fire, once a symbol of purity, warmth, and divine power, became an object of deep-seated terror. The elaborate fire rituals and grand ceremonial hearths that were once the center of Indus spiritual life were abandoned almost overnight. No one dared to light a large blaze again. The fear was palpable. A big fire creates a big smoke, and within that smoke, the serpent could be reborn. Religious practices changed dramatically. Fire rituals became small, controlled, and fearful affairs. A single lamp, a tiny brazier enough to provide light and a token offering, but never enough to cast a significant plume of smoke. Priests would whisper incantations not just to honor the gods, but to ward off the thing that lurked within the fumes. Families cooked on smaller, more efficient stoves, ever watchful of the smoke that curled into the air. The smell of burning wood, once a comforting domestic scent, now carried a note of menace. The architecture of the city also began to reflect this new paranoia. New homes were built with better sealed doors and windows. Ventilation was redesigned not just for comfort, but for defense, with intricate systems meant to prevent smoke from entering a dwelling. The open, airy designs of the past gave way to more enclosed, defensible structures. The entire society reoriented itself around this single, terrifying concept: do not let the smoke in. Historians and archaeologists today might offer more scientific explanations. Perhaps it was a unique form of carbon monoxide poisoning on a massive scale, or the inhalation of superheated, toxic particles generated by the specific materials that burned in the city. Maybe the serpent was simply a visual phenomenon, a heat shimmer, or a strangely shaped cloud of smoke that the traumatized minds of the survivors molded into the shape of their deepest fears. These are plausible theories, but they don't quite capture the visceral horror of the original accounts. They don't explain the consistency of the sightings, the serpent's seemingly intelligent and predatory behavior, or the bizarrely specific internal damage found in the victims. Could a collective hallucination be so detailed, so shared? Or did something truly ancient and malevolent awaken in the heart of that great fire, something that fed on the very air we breathe? The story of the smoke serpent of the Indus fires serves as a powerful reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are not the ones with claws and teeth, but the ones that are formless, silent, and slip through our most formidable defenses. It's a legend born from ash and fear. A ghost story that questions our understanding of the natural world and what might lie within the veil of a simple cloud of smoke. It tells us that after the fire, it's not the embers you should fear, but the shadow they leave behind. What do you think? Was the smoke serpent a real entity, a product of mass hysteria, or something else entirely? Let me know your theories down in the comments. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the smoke. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more tales from the shadows of history. Until next time, stay curious. Have you ever heard of a project so ambitious, so grand, that its failure became more famous than its intended success? Let's travel back to the 17th century, to the golden age of Sweden, a time when King Gustavus Adolphus ruled with an iron fist and a grand vision. He wanted to build a navy that would not only dominate the Baltic Sea, but also serve as a symbol of Sweden's immense power and prestige. And the crown jewel of this new fleet was to be a ship like no other, the Vasa. Imagine this, a colossal warship, Dripping with ornate carvings and armed to the teeth with the heaviest cannons of its time, the Vasa wasn't just a military vessel. It was a floating masterpiece, a statement to the world. King Gustavus Adolphus was personally involved in its design, constantly demanding more. More cannons, more decorations, a higher, more imposing structure. He wanted a ship that would strike fear and awe into the hearts of his enemies just by its appearance. The name itself, Vasa, was taken from the ruling royal dynasty, tying the ship directly to the king's own legacy. The construction took over 2 years, involving hundreds of shipwrights, carpenters, sculptors, and painters. The ship was a monster of its era, over 226 feet long from bow to stern. It was designed to carry 64 heavy bronze cannons, a staggering amount of firepower for the time. Most ships carried their heaviest guns on a single lower deck. But the king insisted the Vasa have 2 full gun decks, stacking immense weight high above the waterline. The ship was adorned with over 700 intricate sculptures, all painted in vibrant, dazzling colors. These weren't just random decorations. They depicted lions symbolizing Swedish royalty, Roman emperors, biblical heroes, and menacing sea creatures. The entire vessel was a piece of propaganda designed to tell a story of Swedish might, courage, and divine right to rule. On August 10, 1628, the day of the maiden voyage, the city of Stockholm was buzzing with excitement. Thousands of people, from commoners to foreign diplomats, gathered along the harbor to witness the launch of this magnificent ship. The weather was calm, with only a light breeze. The Vasa, with its cannons polished and its flags flying high, was a breathtaking sight. It was towed out into the harbor, its sails were unfurled, and it fired a salute. The journey had begun. But it wouldn't last long. As the ship slowly moved toward the harbor entrance, a sudden gust of wind caught its massive sails. The Vasa began to lean, to list dangerously to one side. Water rushed in through the lower, open gun ports. The crew scrambled, trying to correct the balance, but it was too late. The top-heavy design, a direct result of the king's ambitious demands, had doomed the ship. In a matter of minutes, right in front of the horrified crowds, the majestic Vasa slipped beneath the waves and settled on the seabed, just a mile from where it had set sail. It took about 1,300 meters, or less than a nautical mile, to meet its end. Of the 150 people on board, around 30 lost their lives in the disaster. The immediate aftermath was one of shock and disbelief. How could this happen? It was a national humiliation. The king, who was away leading his army in Poland, was furious when he heard the news. An inquest was held to find who was to blame. Was it the shipwrights, the captain, the officers? But the investigation revealed a fatal flaw that went right to the top. The ship's chief builder had died a year before the launch, and his successors knew the design was unstable. They had even demonstrated this to the vice admiral. They lined up men on the upper deck and had them run from side to side, and the ship rocked so violently they had to stop the test for fear of it capsizing right there at the dock. But who would dare to question the king's direct orders? No one was officially punished, as the ultimate responsibility lay with the king himself. For the next 3 centuries, the Vasa lay forgotten at the bottom of Stockholm harbor, preserved in the cold, brackish water that was hostile to the ship-eating worms common in saltier seas. Its story became a local legend, a cautionary tale. Then, in the 1950s, an amateur archaeologist and marine technician named Anders Franzén became obsessed with finding the lost warship. He spent years meticulously studying old documents and charts, and methodically searching the harbor floor. In 1956, he finally succeeded. A core sample he pulled from the seabed contained a piece of blackened oak. The Vasa had been found. What followed was one of the most ambitious marine salvage operations in history. It took years of careful planning. Divers tunneled under the hull to pass massive steel cables, slowly and gently lifting the fragile wreck from its muddy grave. Finally, on April 24, 1961, after 333 years underwater, the Vasa broke the surface. Witnessed by a global television audience, it was an incredible moment. The ship was astonishingly intact. Once raised, the real work began. The waterlogged wood had to be preserved. For 17 years, the entire ship was continuously sprayed with a special wax-like substance. polyethylene glycol to replace the water in the wood and prevent it from cracking and shrinking as it dried. Thousands of artifacts were also recovered from inside the hull, not just cannons and sculptures, but the personal belongings of the crew: clothes, shoes, tools, coins, and even the skeletal remains of some of the victims, offering a poignant human glimpse into life in the 17th century. Today, the Vasa stands in its own dedicated museum in Stockholm, the Vasa Museum. It is one of the most popular tourist attractions in Scandinavia, drawing over 1 million visitors a year, and it's easy to see why. Seeing the ship in person is a truly awe-inspiring experience. It's not a replica. It's the real thing, over 98% original. You can see the sheer scale of it, the incredible detail of the carvings, and the dark, imposing presence it still commands. The Vasa is more than just an old ship, it's a time capsule. It's a spectacular failure that became an unprecedented success in preservation. It serves as a powerful reminder that ambition needs to be tempered with expertise, that pushing for more and more without listening to the people who know best can lead to disaster. The very thing that caused it to sink its top-heavy, over-the-top design is what makes it so fascinating to us today. It's a monument to hubris, but also a testament to human ingenuity, both in its flawed creation and its brilliant resurrection. The story of the Vasa teaches us that sometimes our greatest failures can become our most enduring legacies. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most incredible tales. Let me know in the comments what other historical failures or triumphs you'd like to see covered next. See you in the next video. Have you ever heard a story that feels just a little too real? One that burrows under your skin and stays with you long after you've heard it? Today, we're journeying back thousands of years to ancient Sumer, the cradle of civilization, to uncover a tale that was almost lost to history, a story deliberately erased from the records. It's the story of the Whispering Calf. Imagine the dusty plains of Mesopotamia around 4500 BC. The Sumerians are masters of innovation. They've given us writing, the wheel, and sprawling cities like Uruk and Ur. They are meticulous record keepers, documenting everything on clay tablets, grain harvests, trade deals, and, most importantly for our story, livestock counts. These weren't just simple lists. They were the lifeblood of their economy, detailed accounts of every sheep, goat, and cow that sustained their society. Archaeologists have unearthed thousands of these tablets. Most are mundane, exactly what you'd expect from ancient accountants. But among these endless columns of numbers and symbols, a strange anomaly was discovered. A single, erased line. On a perfectly ordinary livestock tally, someone had inscribed a phrase and then with great effort tried to scratch it away. But clay, once fired, holds its secrets well. Under careful examination, the ghostly words became clear. The calf that speaks at night. This wasn't a one-off discovery. As researchers sifted through more archives, they found scattered, hushed references to this same creature. Furtive mentions in private letters, fragmented warnings on broken pottery. A picture began to form, pieced together from whispers across millennia. The story wasn't about a divine animal or a celebrated marvel. It was about a source of profound fear. According to these pieced-together accounts, a particular calf was born, seemingly normal in every way but one. As darkness fell over the farmlands, it would begin to speak. Not in moos or bellows, but in soft, sibilant whispers that sounded eerily human. Local farmers and herders were the first to notice. Huddled around their fires, they would hear it, a quiet voice drifting from the cattle pens, carried on the night wind. Curiosity, as it always does, got the better of some. They would creep closer, trying to make out the words. And what they heard chilled them to the bone. The calf wasn't speaking nonsense. It was whispering names. Specifically, the names of the dead. It would call out for mothers, fathers, brothers, and children who had long since passed into the Sumerian underworld. The whispers were described as intimate, personal, filled with forgotten memories and shared secrets that only a loved one could possibly know. Imagine the temptation. You've lost someone dear to you, and suddenly you hear their name spoken with such familiarity in the dead of night. It would be almost impossible to resist, to not want to hear more, to feel that connection one last time. People would listen for hours, mesmerized, drawn into the phantom conversations. But this connection came at a terrible price. A chilling pattern began to emerge. Anyone who spent too much time listening to the calf, anyone who truly gave themselves over to its whispers, would change. They would become distant, their eyes vacant. They would stop responding to the voices of the living. Their families would call their names, but they would show no sign of recognition. It was as if the whispers of the dead had deafened them to the world of the living, trapping them in a silent world of memory and grief. They weren't physically harmed, but their spirit, their connection to the community, was severed completely. They were shells, lost in an eternal echo. The fear this created was palpable. This wasn't a monster that ripped and tore. It was something far more insidious. It preyed on love and loss, turning the deepest human emotions into a weapon. The community elders, the priests, they knew they had to act. This whispering calf was a threat to the very fabric of their society, which was built on communication, family, and shared life. So what happened to the calf? The records are deliberately obscure, as if detailing its fate was too dangerous. We can only speculate. Was it quietly slaughtered? Was it driven out into the wilderness to die? Or was it part of some dark ritual, an attempt to silence the voices it channeled? We simply don't know. What we do know is that a concerted effort was made to erase it from history. This brings us back to that clay tablet, the one where the warning was scratched out so violently. An archaeologist who studied it described the marks as frantic, almost desperate. It wasn't a neat, methodical erasure of a scribe correcting a mistake. It was the act of someone trying to claw a memory out of existence, someone who had written the words, and instantly regretted it, as if merely writing them down had brought the terror flooding back. The scribe wasn't just erasing a line of text. They were trying to unremember. This story raises so many questions. Was the calf a biological anomaly? A divine messenger? Or a demonic entity feeding on sorrow? The Sumerians had a complex belief system filled with gods, demons, and spirits that walked among them. The line between the natural and supernatural was incredibly thin. For them, a talking animal might not have been unbelievable, but one that spoke with the voices of the dead, one that stole the souls of the living, would have been an omen of the highest order. Could there be a rational explanation? Perhaps a type of fungus growing on local grain that caused auditory hallucinations. Or maybe it was a case of mass hysteria, a folktale born from collective grief in a community that had suffered loss. These are possibilities, but they don't quite explain the specific, repeated details, the names of the dead, the whispering, the subsequent catatonia of the listeners. And they certainly don't explain the deliberate, fearful effort to scrub it from the official record. History is written by the victors, but it's also edited by the fearful. What other stories have been scratched out and buried, deemed too dangerous to remember? The tale of the Whispering Calf of Sumer is a haunting reminder that some things are so terrifying, the only defense is to pretend they never existed at all. It suggests that the greatest horrors aren't always the monsters we can see, but the whispers we can't resist. What do you think? Was this a real, unexplained phenomenon, or just a powerful piece of ancient folklore designed to warn against dwelling on grief? Let me know your theories down in the comments. I'd love to read what you all think about this chilling mystery from the dawn of time. Thanks so much for hanging out and diving into this strange piece of history with me. If you enjoyed this, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more journeys into the unknown. We have a lot more mysteries to uncover together. Until next time, stay curious. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we re-diving deep into one of America's oldest and most chilling mysteries, the lost colony of Roanoke. But we're not just rehashing the old story. We're going to look at a controversial and fascinating piece of physical evidence that might just hold the key to what happened to those 117 men, women, and children who vanished without a trace over 400 years ago. This is the story of the Dare Stone. To set the stage, let's travel back to the late 16th century. England is trying to establish a foothold in the New World, a land of opportunity and danger. In 1587, a group of English settlers, led by Governor John White, landed on Roanoke Island off the coast of modern-day North Carolina. This wasn't the first attempt, but it was meant to be the first permanent English colony. Among the settlers were Governor White's own daughter, Eleanor Dare, her husband Ananias Dare, and their newborn daughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas. But the colony was in a precarious position. Supplies were low, and tensions with the local Native American tribes were high. Governor White made the difficult decision to sail back to England to gather more resources and reinforcements. He expected to be back within a few months. However, fate had other plans. A war broke out between England and Spain, and every available ship was commandeered for the war effort. It would be 3 long years before John White could finally return to Roanoke. When he arrived in August 1590, what he found was a ghost town. The settlement was deserted. The houses had been taken down, and there was no sign of a struggle, no bodies, nothing. The only clue left behind was a single word carved into a wooden post: Croatoan. Another carving, Crow, was found on a nearby tree. Croatoan was the name of a nearby island, now known as Hatteras Island, and also the name of the friendly Native American tribe that lived there. Before he left, White had instructed the colonists that if they had to leave, they should carve their destination. If they were in distress, they were to carve a Maltese cross above it. There was no cross. This suggested they had left willingly. White wanted to sail to Croatoan Island immediately, but a powerful storm rolled in, damaging his ships and making the journey impossible. Heartbroken and with his crew refusing to continue, he was forced to sail back to England. He would never see his daughter, his granddaughter, or any of the other colonists again, and for centuries, that's where the story ended. The fate of the lost colony became a question mark in the pages of history. Did they integrate with the Croatoan tribe? Did they try to sail back to England and get lost at sea? Or did something far more sinister happen? Now, let's fast forward nearly 350 years to 1937. A man named Louis E. Hammond, a tourist from California, was exploring the swamps of North Carolina near the Chowan River, about 50 miles inland from Roanoke Island. He claimed he was looking for hickory nuts when he stumbled upon a curious-looking rock. It was a 21-pound piece of quartz, and what caught his eye were the strange inscriptions covering one side. It looked like Old English lettering. Hammond took the stone with him, and eventually it found its way into the hands of historians and scholars at Emory University in Atlanta. When they deciphered the text, they were stunned. The inscription appeared to be a message from none other than Eleanor White Dare, addressed to her father, John White. The message was heartbreaking. It claimed that after he left, the colonists had suffered terribly from sickness and attacks. It mentioned that many of them, including her husband Ananias and her daughter Virginia, had been killed. The message was dated 1591, 4 years after White had left. The front of the stone read, Ananias Dare and Virginia went hence unto heaven 1591. Any Englishman show John White Gover via. It was a plea for anyone who found it to show it to her father. This was explosive. If authentic, it was the first piece of direct evidence from a colonist explaining what happened. It suggested a much grimmer fate than simply assimilating with a friendly tribe. The location where it was found, far inland, also matched a theory that the colonists might have moved up the Chowan River. But the story didn't end there. The back of the stone had another inscription, a much longer one. It was a continuation of the tragic tale. Eleanor wrote that soon after her father left, their small ship was lost. They were forced to move inland. For 2 years, they lived among friendly natives, but then sickness struck, and half of them died. Then, a war with hostile natives began, and many more were killed in attacks. The message described a brutal massacre. It said that all the colonists were slain, except for 7. The names of the dead were listed, including her husband and daughter. She wrote, "All dead but 7. My name Eleanor Dare, 1591. It was a message from a survivor, a witness to the complete annihilation of her community, a mother who had lost her child. It was a desperate cry into the wilderness, hoping her father would one day find it and know their fate. The discovery of this Dare Stone, as it came to be known, set off a firestorm of excitement and debate. Emory University announced the find to the world, and it made national headlines. It seemed the mystery was finally solved. To encourage others to search for more evidence, the university even offered a cash reward for any other inscribed stones that could be linked to the Roanoke colonists. And that's when things got complicated. Following the announcement, a wave of new stones began to surface. Over the next 3 years, a man from Georgia named Bill Eberhart discovered 47 more stones, one by one. These stones continued the narrative, telling a sprawling story of the 7 survivors' journey westward, from North Carolina through Georgia, and even into the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. The story became more and more elaborate, with tales of marriages to Native Americans, travels, and the eventual death of Eleanor Dare herself. At first, the academic community was thrilled. Each new stone seemed to add another piece to the puzzle. But soon, doubts began to creep in. The sheer number of stones was one red flag. Why would the survivors spend so much time and effort carving their life story onto dozens of heavy rocks? The linguistic patterns on the subsequent stones also raised suspicions. The spelling and grammar seemed inconsistent, almost like someone was trying too hard to imitate Elizabethan English but making modern mistakes. The source of the stones, Bill Eberhart, also came under scrutiny. He was a stonecutter by trade, which meant he had the skills and tools to carve rocks. And he was conveniently the one finding almost all of them. Geologists who examined the stones noted that while the first stone was a type of quartz found in North Carolina, many of Eberhart's stones were from Georgia, fitting his own location rather than the colonists' supposed path. By 1941, the consensus among most serious historians and archaeologists had turned. An investigation published in the Saturday Evening Post exposed the numerous inconsistencies and labeled the entire collection, including the original stone a probable hoax. The language was deemed too modern in some places, the narrative too convenient, and the finder too suspicious. The academic excitement turned into academic embarrassment. Emory University quietly packed the stones away, and the Dare stones faded from the public eye, becoming a footnote in the Roanoke mystery, dismissed as a clever but ultimately fake artifact. But is that the end of the story? Not quite. For decades, the stones were considered a closed case of hoax. But in recent years, some researchers have called for a second look, particularly at the original stone found by Louis Hammond. Unlike the 47 stones that followed, the first stone stands apart. It was found by a different person, in a location that makes historical sense, and before any reward was offered. Modern scientific analysis offers new possibilities. Ed Schrader, a geologist and president of Brenau University, where the stones are now housed, has been leading a new investigation. Using advanced techniques like Raman spectroscopy and X-ray fluorescence, his team has been analyzing the physical properties of the stones. Their initial findings have been intriguing. The analysis of the first Dare stone suggests that its carved surface shows a similar level of weathering to its uncarved surfaces, which could indicate the carvings are very old. They've looked at the mineral composition and the weathering patterns on the inscribed surfaces compared to the natural, uncarved surfaces. Furthermore, they found that the interior of the stone, beneath the surface layer, was a brilliant white quartz, while the surface was coated in a darker patina. This patina had seeped into the carved letters, something that would take a very long time to happen naturally. This doesn't happen with a fresh carving. This scientific evidence challenges the long-held assumption that the first stone is a modern fake. It suggests it could genuinely be from the 16th century. Of course, this doesn't prove that Eleanor Dare carved it, but it reopens the possibility that it's an authentic artifact from the Roanoke era. So where does that leave us? We have a tantalizing artifact that was once hailed as the solution to a great mystery, then dismissed as a fraud, and is now being re-examined with fresh eyes and new technology. If the first Dare stone is real, it paints a harrowing picture of the colonists' final years' story of disease, starvation, and violent conflict, ending in a massacre that left only a handful of survivors. It would mean that Virginia Dare, the symbolic first child, died as a toddler in the harsh wilderness of the New World. If it's a hoax, then it's one of the most elaborate and successful historical forgeries in American history, one that fooled experts for a time and perfectly tapped into the public's fascination with the lost colony. The other 47 stones are almost universally considered fakes, likely created by Eberhard to cash in on the reward and the fame. But the first stone, the one found in the swamp in 1937, remains an enigma. Is it the final, heartbreaking message of Eleanor Dare, or is it the clever creation of a 20th century hoaxer? The debate continues, and until we have definitive proof one way or the other, the Dare Stone will remain a powerful and controversial symbol of America's oldest unsolved mystery. What do you think? Is the stone a genuine message from the past or a clever fake? Let me know your theories down in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think about this fascinating piece of history. See you next time.